Good evening, everybody. Before we get started this evening with our city council meeting, I need somebody on council to give me a motion to come out of executive session from our previous meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Please cast your votes. Do I have a motion to extend an offer for city manager position to Brad Brown?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved. Could I clarify that my light was not on for the first vote? That it was intended yes? Okay.
Call to order Bethany City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 1st, 2019. Would you please rise for the invocation and the flag salute? Mr. Knapp, will you lead the flag salute? Mr. Herron, will you lead us in prayer?
Let us bow our heads. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that we have the freedom here to gather tonight. We just thank you for this great nation that we live in. Thank you for giving us wisdom and discernment, Lord. We just pray that you will just bless us here tonight. Bless our community. In your name we pray. Amen.
Join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First off, I wanted to show off my new OML, Oklahoma Municipal League pen, and I wanted to give one to each council member because they gave me these, and this is a real ceremonial passing of the pens down the aisle. City of Bethany is a member of the Oklahoma Municipal League. They're a great organization, kind of helps us have a statewide voice as a city. So proud to be a member of OML. Also, I want to welcome Trent and Cindy. I saw you coming in. Yeah, there you are. From the Oklahoma Educators Credit Union. Thanks for being here this evening. I also want to thank the City Council, first of all, for the search committee. Mrs. Larson and Councilmember Palmer and previous Vice Mayor and Councilmember Paul Todd formed the search committee to help us with our city manager search and narrow them down and come up with questions and set interviews. And glad that we have extended an offer. We will be extending an offer. We voted, as you saw. And so I'm excited about where we are right now and just want to thank the council for all the hard work and a job well done. Also, I'd like to thank the staff for enduring a lengthy process of trying to get a city manager, and we have a city attorney. I think our greatest days are ahead of us, like I said, and I'm just glad that we've gotten to this point. So very, very proud of the staff and the council. Item 1 tonight is the consent docket, A through D. I did have a question, though, on D that I failed to ask earlier. This item D, the police vehicle, is this coming out of their department budget or impound fees? I know I'd heard that they have impound fees.
This particular purchase is coming from the impound fee, which was budgeted for two officer vehicles.
Okay.
We've had 2 destroyed in accidents recently, but this one was budgeted for, and it's coming out of the impound fee, not from the police department budget, but from the impound fee.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question also. ImageNet Consulting, again, $5,763. Is there anyone with staff here that can explain this cost again? It seems to keep coming up, and it's always a high number, and I don't understand what's going on.
My understanding was the 5700 was actually the connection and the final hookup on the server. The servers were actually moved. I could be misspeaking, but from my memory, that's what it tells me. So it's related to the dual servers that were installed, and we switched the location where they had been, and so it's in a new location, and so it's the connectivity to those new dual servers.
Is it safe to assume there was quite a bit of hardware that went with that? It wasn't just technical support for connecting these servers, right?
Well, I haven't actually read the invoices or the detail behind that, but I mean, the hardware itself most likely would have been budgeted with the actual bid for the hardware, which was approximately, I don't know, in the $30,000 range. But this probably would have more to do with the cabling and the connection and an added power supply.
Thank you, Mr. Penner.
You're welcome.
Do I have a motion for approval for the consent docket?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved?
Item 2 is a special presentation. It's the Governor's Proclamation for Hispanic Heritage Month, presented by Fred Mendoza of Governor Stitt's transition team. Fred's a chair for the Governor's Hispanic Initiative Council. He's a member of Governor's Prayer Breakfast 2020 Steering Committee. CEO, Fred Mendoza Entertainment Management in Nashville and Dallas, working with music legends Leanne Rimes, Paul McCartney, Waylon Jennings, Carl Perkins, Chuck Berry, and more. Mr. Mendoza now lives in Oklahoma City, primarily involved in business investments. He's a good friend of mine, and he is here on behalf of Governor Stitt to present us with this proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor. It's an honor to be here, members of the council. It really is an honor. I recognize many of you from several civic contacts in recent times, and I just can't tell you how honored I am to be here tonight on behalf of the governor. And it's a first in many regards, probably before this city council and in the state of Oklahoma for a governor to recognize the Hispanic population of Oklahoma. Councilwoman Sandoval, particularly, I want to offer something to you that on your shoulders rest future generations of pride and commitment and courtesy and public service, and I thank you for your service. Let me read this proclamation. Whereas September 15th through October 15th, 2019 is National Hispanic Heritage Month throughout the United States, and whereas the Hispanic communities of Oklahoma have historically made major contributions to the growth, strength, and standard of excellence of Oklahoma in areas of education, business, military service, health, sports, government service, law enforcement, philanthropy, civic leadership, and much, much more. And whereas the Hispanic culture, traditions, and contemporary influences today reach into virtually every corner of Oklahoma, and whereas the Hispanic economic impact exceeds $8 billion annually in Oklahoma, with more than 10,000 small business owners affecting and contributing to the economic measures of creating jobs, city and county tax-based contributions, in-state purchasing power, ad valorem valuations for school district support, and the overall wealth and development of Oklahoma. Now, therefore, I, Governor J. Kevin Stitt, do hereby proclaim September 2019 as Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you very much. I appreciate this honor to be here before you, this council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let the governor know we have an autographed picture of him back in the back of the room. Appreciate that, too. Item 3 is a presentation from the YMCA. Consideration and possible approval of contract between the City of Bethany and YMCA of Greater Oklahoma City Bethany YMCA for their operation of the municipal swimming pool 2020 season. How are you?
Good evening. I'm good. How are you? So I just appreciate this opportunity to come back and share with each one of you that, as we know, 2019 was our first summer of partnership, and we really were excited with how everything turned out. Very positive summer across the board for us, and so we're here tonight to present once again a proposal for the 2020 season. I believe that was presented to you all in your packet. One opportunity of change from what we previously had presented was the City of Bethany this past summer was responsible for recouping the any lost revenue, so revenue over expenses if we lost money. What we normally do with other municipalities is just have a set management fee. And so what I'd like to propose this evening is changing that to include a $5,000 management fee instead of having any type of recovery. So just have a set fee instead. I'm happy to answer any other questions at this time too.
$5,000 fee. Other cities pay that?
Yes, sir. We have agreements with the City of Chickasha, the City of Guthrie, and the City of Stillwater. They have management fees. They pay different amounts, but that is roughly what the majority of them pay.
And the reason why we didn't pay that this year was kind of because it was a
It
trial
was a
basis. See if it
new
was gonna
setup.
work.
We were just trying to make sure that we kind of had everything in place. So yes, sir, again.
Do you know what the City of Bethany, I'd heard, the numbers escape me, the financial amount that we seem to lose every summer operating our swimming pool prior to the agreement with the Y?
It was on average of about $10,000, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
This past year, through management, it was basically a break even, so we ended up not losing any. I think we actually surplus maybe about $500 total, and we still have a couple remaining invoices, so it might actually be a legitimate zero debt.
Okay.
But that's the only change there too.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I have a question. So what you're saying, you want to take the bullet point reimbursing the Y to offsetting incurred expenses not covered by revenue by the end of September to a $5,000 flat fee.
Yes, sir.
You know, I don't see how this is a good deal for the city. We're still doing all the maintenance, we're doing all the chemicals, we're doing all the testing, we're paying overtime to people to be out there, and then at the end of all this, we pay $5,000. I'm not sure the numbers are, I'm not sure we're saving any money. Do we have a staff report on this?
Historically, the city has lost somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000 a year on operating the pool. This year, it was a break-even situation. The only overtime we have is we would have anyways because of pool maintenance equipment. We had an equipment failure early part of the season. Other than that, city staff is not involved with operating the pool. They raised the level of safety for the pool operation. They raised the level of perception. They had very little trouble needing any police assistance or any extra supervision from city staff. This was a turnkey situation. It was a gamble on both sides to go into this year and break even. Neither side knew if it was going to be beneficial for the city. This turned out to be a good deal. We cannot operate the pool cheaper than $5,000 and cover the chemical expense and all the utility expense, which we would cover anyways. So committing to a $5,000 management fee for something that has a public safety issue, has a public health issue, has a public perception issue, and delivers a benefit to the community, I think is well worth the expense.
Well, I would argue the point that we do have people involved in that. We have a city employee with a CPO license. We do repairs, we do maintenance, we do mowing, we do inspection once a week. There are things that we do, so.
And we would do that regardless. If they didn't do it, we would still mow the park, we would still fix the pumps, we would still buy the chemicals to treat the pool. This is a separate and apart. This is just, in essence, hiring a professional management to oversee the pool operation and to make sure that we have ample qualified people to serve as lifesavers and to be able to evaluate what the public needs to as far as testing, whether they should be in the pool, checking on their hydration, checking on sunstroke. I think that we're still money ahead by entering into this agreement.
And one of the things I do recall is that the city always had a hard time getting lifeguards. hired for the summer as well. Is that correct? I remember that was always somewhat of a challenge.
That was what HR, Steve Harsman, said over and over again. This is much, much easier than us in incurring the effort to recruit, maintain, supervise, and maintain the certifications.
Well, obviously, without seeing any numbers, without seeing any historical data, I'm not going to argue with you. But one other question. A fee of no more than $5 will be charged, but you have the discretion of raising that fee if you feel like you need to. What's the odds of that happening? And what kind of fee?
It's my understanding we
raises are
would not
talking
plan on
about?
raising any of those fees. That was a set point that we changed into this summer, and it seemed to be an appropriate cost to charge for day pass use, and it's not something we plan on changing going into this
The
season.
contract says this fee shall be subject to change by the YMCA as it deems necessary to raise additional revenue. So it's possible, right?
To that point, it could be, but like I said, it wasn't changed this summer. There was no intention of changing it going into this next summer as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, Mr. Moore. You said that the prior years, we lost approximately $20,000 to $25,000 a year. I'm assuming that in that cost that the city had expenditures for liability coverage or whatever else coverage would need to be. So what I'm asking now is, are we not continuing to carry insurance on that pool area?
The
And if
YMCA
so,
would-
that our cost would be more than the $5,000, would it not?
The YMCA provides the liability insurance, and we would have a policy with OMAG for the facility insurance as we normally. The prior costs also include us operating a concession stand and the product loss and all that. Again, we didn't do concessions this year. And
But
I'm basing the historical.
The point is, though, that the $5,000 will not be the only cost. There is some insurance involved that would be, I don't want us to think that's all we're going to be out for that pool. I think there's some building coverage that would be included.
Is that, we pay that anyway, right? Because we own the pool. So do we pay the OMAG?
We will
coverage
pay for our
anyhow?
own self-insurance for the
Yeah.
liability of the city side of it, but they are also taking responsibility for the liability of their supervision and of the pool operation.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I think at some point, doesn't the Governmental Tort Claims Act come into play related to the liability of the municipal pool and the use and related to any potential claims? I mean, isn't that a factor that dictates how much money is used to insure and operate the pool?
That is. And the other component to this is the fact that the historical information I got was mostly from Steve Harsman and looking at some of the past budgets back through the decade. So again, we're going to have facility costs. We're going to have chemical costs. We're going to have the pool equipment breakdown costs. Those are all going to be ours. Those wouldn't change no matter who is supervising and operating the pool. I just believe the YMCA carries a level of qualifications and professionalism that represents well for the city of Bethany.
May I finish?
Yes.
I had one other thing to
Okay.
say. I do want to thank the Y for all that they have done with the pool this year. I think it's been a win-win for us, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'd just like to say, initially, when this came up, I voted against this the first time, solely out of concern for the fees and for various students and things around the community. That being said, I visited this summer with my daughters, which we've done numerous times previous summers, where I actually, took pictures of some lifeguards on a stand because they were not paying attention at all, and was very concerned about that. And I'll say that both times that we were there this summer, that the lifeguarding staff was very on point. And I feel
Very
like
good.
that safety is worth it, is worth the fee. And so I've changed my mind on that.
And if I can say, just especially because this obviously is a little bit different than what was proposed previously, that $5,000 is also consideration to some of the items that go into the management side of it, obviously, with it being a management fee of the expertise of us having staff who have additional duties that when it comes to the summer, they add their specialty to make sure that this is a safe pool exercise as well. So I just wanted to add that point too.
Thank you. Any other questions, or do I have a motion to approve this 2020 swimming pool season agreement?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Thank you. Item 4 is consideration and possible approval of proposal for professional services with Troy D. Rhodes and Company, Inc. for Bethany City Hall renovations. I believe we have Mr. Rhodes with us here. If there's anyone that has any questions, or do I have a motion for approval?
I think we need some explanations because I don't think the majority of the council really knows what happened the first go-around, the second go-around, and where we're at right now.
Good evening, Troy Rhodes. Thank you for having me this evening. So yes, just maybe give a little history, background. I'll do my best to explain it 2 years I think has gone by, maybe a little over 2 years. So in 2017, we were asked to come in and assess essentially what were ADA upgrades to the facility to try to understand what would allow for the accessibility in various parts of the building to make it accessible. As we began those discussions, and at the time we were working with staff, at the time we were really geared specifically toward the accessibility improvements. What do we need to do to be able to make the building accessible? And there were a few ideas that we knew about that were discussed, including the restroom renovations. And we began to talk a little bit about this space that we're sitting in tonight. But then as we began to understand the entire building, we wanted to make sure we understood that it doesn't do any good to be able to make a building accessible if the site is not accessible, for example. And so what we usually do when we're trying to evaluate either an existing building or a new building is that we start from the outside in. And so we wanted to make sure that we have an accessible site to get you from the parking lot to the building. And so we studied what that would take. And then at the doors themselves, primarily the north and south entry doors, and I don't know if I need to get closer or further away. I'm hearing a feedback, but it doesn't bother me if it doesn't bother you. So we needed to address those front doors. There are also some hardware issues with those front doors in fact, I think they're still locked off today to be able to make sure that those doors don't get further damaged. So we needed to be able to make improvements to those doors. As we began to talk about the doors themselves, that also brought into play access control. So in other words, key fobs or card swipes that would allow people in and out of the building, and not just at the doors because those doors are open during hours, public hours, but at various other security points around the building. And so we began to study what it would take to have access control within the facility. Then once you get inside the building, we wanted to look at what it would take to do the restroom upgrades. And then we also did a study to determine whether or not we needed to put an elevator in. And at the time, in reality, it's for an office area the size of the space that's up there on the second floor, it is not required to have an elevator for that specific space. But we were asked to look at what is the possibility of putting in an elevator. And so we studied the options. We came up with about 3 different options, variety of costs, because we knew budget was an issue. The building actually was originally designed with a pit right on the other side of the hallway there. But when it was originally designed, it wasn't designed big enough for today's elevator requirements. And so we had to look at options that would allow us to fit the elevator within that box. Or go to additional expense trying to expand that box. And then it affects not only what happens on the first floor, it also affects what happens on the second floor. And probably the biggest expense would be what would happen down below grade in terms of having to excavate and tear out the existing concrete pit that's actually there today. So then we also studied accessibility into this space, the doors themselves in both locations. Even though they're double doors, the single width of a single door does not meet accessibility, and so we knew we were going to have to make some changes there. And then once you enter the space here, there's a lot of obstacles that have to be overcome in this space, and it's honestly one of the more challenging ADA concepts or the concepts we had to come up with are one of the more challenging spaces we've had to deal with in terms of renovations, just because of the number of steps and the fact that your desk area sits on a different level, and so we don't want to make sure that we also deal with accessibility for the patrons, but also accessibility for the council members or the planning commissioners or whoever might need to use that space. So we looked at options of being able to provide lifts. Potentially, we had 2 or 3 different versions of lifts that we would allow for to come in on this side and lower down into that level. And then we also looked at opportunities to be able to go back through that wall and enter into that conference room from the space. And so that required another level of study. So that was kind of that initial cursory review, and we did quite a bit of drawings in order to be able to understand what we could and couldn't do. When we got into the building and started looking at other issues that might come into play, there weren't just ADA accessibility issues, there were also some building code issues. So we came up with some solutions to solve a few of the building code issues. The one primary one that we focused on was the stair itself, the monumental stair that goes up to the second floor. It doesn't have the height requirements. When it was built, it probably did, but in today's codes, it doesn't meet the height requirements for guardrails or handrails. So we looked at 3 different options to be able, and again, looking at options so that we understand price and value. So we did a lot of study. We have produced quite a few drawings to be able to kind of understand what that was going to look like. And then there was a changeover in city management. And so when the city manager understood what we were working on, we began to have discussions with the city manager at the time about what the plan was. And there were different ideas about what she wanted to see in terms of the elevator, for example. She didn't want to see the elevator, any of the 3 elevators that we had chosen. We chose them primarily because of size and cost, but she wanted to have something that was a little more prominent in the lobby itself. And so we looked at options to be able to have an elevator actually in the lobby itself, which requires a certain level of study to be able to understand that. And then as we began to look deeper into this space, we looked at some other options in terms of providing access to the various levels. And then also began to study some additional improvements that might need to be made to the space if we're going to do a significant amount of upgrades to the space. What else might need to be done in order to kind of up the level of the space itself. So we looked at different lighting options. We looked at several different concepts to address the sound and acoustical issues in the space. We looked at different sound control area, different options for the sound control. So that kind of led to another level of design and another level of time that was required to understand what the goals were at that time. We still had the idea that we needed to create accessibility from the site into the building, restrooms and all of that. So that's kind of, and I guess the 3rd time around is kind of where we're at right now. And so we've met with city staff to be able to understand now what are the goals now, with the change in leadership. And so we wanted to make sure we understood that we don't want to necessarily do more than what's expected, but we want to make sure we do a minimum. And so we've created a priority list, and based on the dollars that are going to be available from a budget standpoint, we understand that there's going to be limitations about what can be done based on current budget year amounts that are available. So we're also trying to understand if we set the drawings up to have it done all at one time, or do we set the drawings up so that it could be done annually, maybe as dollars become more available or as new budget years come around, which is honestly, even more complex because of, you've got to be able to carve away so let's say there's 15 items that need to be done, and we think that we can afford 7 in this year's budget, so we're going to set up bid documents to be able to do those 7. Budgets come in and pricing comes in, and we may have to add one or take one away, and so understanding the constraints of the budget is also what's driving some of the challenges with being able to put drawings together. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
It does. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure what our current goals and objectives are. I know we want to make the building ADA compliant, but I'm not actually sure where we're wanting to go. So how is, I'm reading through the project scope. What you're proposing now, it looks very similar to what you just said was done initially. So what's the difference from initially and what we're going to have now?
And initially, keep in mind, we we never got to the point where we were ready or finished with drawings and ready to go out to get bids.
Okay.
So we had ideas, we had drawings, we had concepts, we had enough information to be able to get some preliminary budgets together, but nothing was ever 100% done and ready to go out and get built. And so as we've kind of made those changes from the first round to the second round, you end up backing up a little bit in order to be able to redo the elevator concept, for example. And so we didn't get the elevator concept to the point where it's ready to be built or ready to be bid. We just had conceptual drawings that we had to be able to communicate the ideas. I did, just to try to summarize, I put together just a list of, maybe I'll call them project highlights. I know nobody wants to talk about ADA improvements as a highlight, but just maybe just read through this and and I can explain these as much as I can if you want to go back and look at any of these. But as I mentioned, so site improvements, and some of the site improvements have actually, I think, already been done to a certain degree, but we want to make sure that they're done completely, because it really doesn't do any good to have just a partial compliance site. We're still looking at doing the entry doors, the north and south entry doors. There are actually two different options for the types of door systems that we looked at. So we originally were looking at essentially a replacement of the door system that was there, but with newer hardware, obviously, to keep it from doing what it's doing right now. On the second round, on the second time around, we actually wanted, the city management at the time wanted to look at another option to upgrade those entrances. So we went from today what's called a storefront system, that's what's there today, to an all-glass system. So in other words, a frameless all-glass system. And what would that, because it is an upgraded look and an upgraded feel, and I think that was part of her goal, was to try to up the level of not just aesthetics, but the feel and I guess the condition of the space itself. Either door will work fine, but we needed, to be able to make those all-glass systems work. I've done those before in a city hall in Woodward, and it's a pretty complex goal to try to make an all-glass system work that's accessible, still has security requirements, still has the ability to open and close automatically. And so, but that was part of the discussion in the second round. My understanding is that we're probably going to back away from that in this third round and go back to the original idea of just replacing with a system that is similar to what is there today from an aluminum storefront. But we are still considering access control. And so from a safety and security standpoint for the building itself, we are still considering access control as a part of the door replacement. So it's not just swapping out the doors and getting new hardware. And believe it or not, I think we looked at 6 different options for access control, because it all depends on how much control, how you want to be able to change out the codes, what kind of systems they are, how many doors there are. There's a lot of variables when it comes to access control. Restroom renovation. So the restroom renovation is not just taking away a stall or making a stall bigger. Right now, the only way to make those public restrooms accessible that we have been able to come up with is a complete tear out and redo of those restrooms. And so it also encompasses I think it's a janitor's closet that's kind of right in between those restrooms, which also has some mechanical systems within it, so ductwork and hot water tank and different, I think there's some storage in there as well. And so now that we are needing to use that space to create larger restrooms, now we've got to deal with that mechanically to be able to get the ductwork to still feed where it needs to feed. It also takes away the drinking fountain location in that spot, so we've had to relocate the drinking fountain around the corner. But by the end, and the other part of that, honestly, I think there are more restrooms in that, or more facilities, toilets and urinals and sinks in the bathroom, believe it or not, than is what is required by code. So in order but to make them accessible, we had to remove one. So part of our study on the first go-round was to completely analyze the entire building so that we understood, just like we would have to do for any building, any client, it's not just the city, but when we work for a private client or even another public client, the cities that we work in require us to go back and verify that when we're doing ADA improvements and removing urinals or toilets, that we aren't moving them to the point where there's less than what is required. So we had to evaluate the requirements for the plumbing fixture count in the entire building to be able to know if we could even take those restrooms out, and we can. By code, we can do that. But it is a complete replacement of the restrooms. This is not an accessibility issue, but this is one of the things that we've talked about is the removal of that desk that's out there, that circular shaped desk, because it just doesn't serve a function right now, and it'll open up that lobby space. We still feel pretty strongly that the lobby stair itself needs to be upgraded. It just doesn't even come close to the requirements for guardrail heights. So it's a safety concern, and not just the height itself, but also the spacing between the pickets. And so if you have a child that's running up those stairs, the spacing is not tight enough to meet current building standards. It's not to say that it didn't back when the building was built, it just doesn't today. So we still feel like we need to meet those obligations for building code, and that's not an accessibility, that's a building code issue. And then I didn't even mention this earlier, but the desk itself where the utility counter area is for the transaction counter with the glass, there's a requirement that we lower one section of that to meet accessibility. That way you've got an opportunity to serve different heights at that glass transaction window. We're also looking at replacing the conference room doors. I say doors pointing this way, because of the access control, but also right now I think they've just probably reached their time limit in terms of their usefulness and their wear and tear. Over time, they're just hard to open, hard to close, and so that's one of the options that we talked about. Those particular doors, if I'm not mistaken, aren't a problem in terms of ADA. It was more about a maintenance issue on those doors. And then the council doors, so those, even though it's, like I said, even though it's a pair of doors, the requirement is a 36-inch leaf in order to meet the 34-inch actual pass requirement. And I believe those are two 30-inch doors, if I'm not mistaken. So those doors don't meet accessibility. And there is no, this is kind of a common misperception, there is no requirement for, from an accessibility standpoint, that you have push-button controls, like when you enter and exit a building, that you push a button and the door automatically opens. That's a convenience thing that a lot of owners choose to do because it lets their patrons know that, they want to make it as easy as possible to enter and exit the building, but it actually is not an accessibility requirement. So, a lot of times those things get added in at the end, or sometimes they get taken out at the end because of budget. So that's one of the things that we can consider either putting in or not putting in on this building. It's really a matter of budget choice. And then the accessibility, so when you come into this space itself, you enter in off of this main level from the lobby. You're at that stair level right there. So that means that the upper level and all of these lower levels are not accessible. And so the way that it was, essentially, the way that it was, I forget the term that was used, but it was allowed to kind of resemble compliance, maybe, I don't know the exact word, but that you've got a flat area up here where there's a couple of chairs missing over there. That was kind of contemplated as our accessible area for wheelchairs, but there's just not enough room. It doesn't meet the actual requirements for for a single wheelchair to actually sit and park right there. And it's not just about wheelchairs. It's also about somebody with crutches, or somebody with a cane, or somebody that's blind, or somebody that's hearing impaired. I mean, there's more to ADA than just wheelchair access. But we've got to build a ramp, and we're planning to build a ramp on this side, basically to be able to get from the main level to that upper level. And so that 7-inch rise will become the accessible patron seating. So we'll have to have a couple of additional movable chairs, because when you have an accessible seating area in an assembly occupancy like this, you have to have a companion chair. And so we'll have a couple of seats that we'll need to put up on that higher level up there. So we can provide accessibility to the higher level. We have accessibility to the main level because that's the main level. Then the problem becomes, how do we get accessibility to the space that you're sitting in right now? And so one of the discussions was, if we had a lift that could basically kind of go up and down this stair, it could stop maybe at the level you're on and then continue down all the way down to this level. It's a pretty expensive solution, first of all. And honestly, it's going to take up a really large amount of space over on this side of the room. And so we would have to remove at least 6, 8, maybe 10 chairs in order to be able to fit that in. And so we looked at a couple of different options, and I think the goal right now is, rather than providing full accessibility all the way down to this level, that we basically lift the seating area that you're sitting in right now. And so if we lift that seating area, in other words, pour new concrete into that seating area, then that would get us up to that highest level. And so when you, as a council member, or as a planning commissioner, or anybody that sits in there, would be able to walk in and essentially be at that same level all the way around. Now, in order to do that, that requires that we have to rebuild this desk and push it forward. And so I've been in enough of these meetings to know that when somebody gets up and down out of there, you're constantly moving around. So we're also going to push it forward and allow a little more room behind the backside of that. So in case there was somebody on the council that needed an accessible area, there'd be a little more room to maneuver, even though there's removable chairs. So that right now is the solution that we're considering. When we rebuild that desk, we get into issues like the air vents that are down here, because we want to make sure that we allow for air to continue to flow into the space. So we have a solution to be able to remedy that, to keep those in place to minimize our costs. And then we are also considering, once you're on that level, being able to actually introduce a couple of new doors, essentially where you're at, Mr. Palmer, or where you're at, Mr. Herron, that you would have doors that would go into that conference room. So when if you happen to leave for executive session, you'd be able to go straight to those doors or come back in rather than going around. So that's another one of those upgrades. And then we're still considering, as budget allows, some of the cosmetic upgrades in the room. So again, if we're going to go to the expense to do some of this, we're going to be tearing up a lot of carpet. Maybe it's time we go ahead and look at replacing the carpet. We're going to have to build a new desk to be able to do this. And then we are still considering some of those sound options. We've got like 4 different design options that we could consider for the panel behind the council dais. And then from the standpoint of this space, this level right here that I'm standing on, you would still have to be able to carry a mic for somebody, if somebody happens to be in a wheelchair on the upper level, because now they can get to that point, but they want to speak. It's totally acceptable to be able to take a mic to that person. So that's the solution for the space that we're standing on right now. Stair handrails. So these stairs, even though they're spaced far apart and there's multiple stairs there, we feel like that it is important to be able to add a handrail. So we're looking at adding a handrail at all 3 of these different locations. Mentioned rebuilding the council desk. Mentioned the doors going to the conference room. Mentioned the sound control, So when we put the accessible seating on that higher level up there on that space, it takes up enough room that we're going to have to relocate the sound area. And so at least that's the current plan right now, is essentially we swap it and put it over here on the other side. And then if again, depending on budget, if we can afford to do that, then the plan would be to design it or at least detail it and draw it in a way so that it fits in with the design of whatever we're doing in the space itself, whether that's drywall and paint or wood and trim or whatever the case may be. Mentioned the acoustical wall behind you. And then there are still access points located throughout the building. Again, that's not an accessibility requirement. That's more of a building security and safety request, I guess. It's not a requirement. It's really just a request of the staff. And I believe there are 6 locations that we're still looking at. There are still a lot of accessibility concerns in the employee areas, but there are provisions that can be made for employees that you can't necessarily make for public. And so the idea right now is to try to focus the dollars and focus the time and the effort on the public side of the building. I don't know. I hope that helps answer and describe some of the different things that we're trying to accomplish.
I guess questions for staff is the follow-up. When we do get new city managers, things tend to change. So I'm wondering if this shouldn't be paused for 30 to 60 days until our new city manager can get seated. And secondly, who on staff is currently driving this?
Well, I could answer that, Councilman Herron. I contacted Mr. Rhodes, I don't know, it's been a few weeks ago, I guess, and asked him to revive the plans that we needed because we felt it was urgent that we address these ADA issues. And I think that the things that Mr. Rhodes has outlined tonight, I think are things that need to be done. And there might be some difference in decorations or aesthetics or things like that, but I think the actual changes to provide accessibility, I don't think would change much with someone coming in.
Yeah.
The mayor and I both met with Mr. Rhodes in that meeting, and I think we're just trying to establish a way to provide accessibility in the most cost-effective way, and hopefully that wouldn't change when a new city manager is seated. So
I would think that since I believe we have $160,000 in the budget currently for this ADA compliancy, that even before a city manager is seated, we vote on this. The council's spoken. We're doing this. We have citizens that need to have access and be able to get in this building, and the right thing to do is to simply do this, in my opinion.
And I fully agree with that. It's just that last time when we had a changeover in city manager, it cost us $24,000. So I would hate to see
In
that
additional
happen.
drawings?
In additional that we're scrapping or not.
So I would
gonna
think,
be
go
using.
ahead, hurry up and vote on it, so we're not doing any more drawing.
That would be my question, Mr. Rhodes. How much have we spent up to this point between the two previous times?
I think right now, total fees are around 41,000.
And we're looking at, between your architectural and mechanical fees, about 65,000 more. So we're well over 100,000. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a good rule of thumb is your architectural and mechanical fees are 10 to 12% of the total project. So we're looking at $700,000 total. Is that a good estimate?
It depends on the complexity of the project when you're dealing with percentages.
But I'm close, right?
It can vary between 6 and 15, or even as low as 4, depending on, if you're dealing with a $50 million project that has a lot of repetition, it can be very low percentage-wise. If
What
you're
what
dealing
did
with
we
a small-
decide? What did we decide as far as whether we're going to go with an elevator or reasonable accommodation? As you said, that space up there doesn't require it. To me, it would be easier for someone in that upper office to come down and meet someone in the lobby or in the fishbowl than to put in an elevator, which is going to be very expensive.
And
And
that's
that's a
actually-
reasonable accommodation.
And that's exactly what was decided by the current staff that we met with.
And I want to ask the question again that Councilman Herron asked. Who is your point of contact that's helping you to derive the direction that you're going with these plans, these new plans?
As was mentioned, so Mr. Smart and Mayor Westmoreland are the two people that we have met with most recently. Started with, well, I don't know if it matters who it started with, but currently, to answer your question, those are the two individuals that we've met with.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. One is, get my mic on.
Sure.
One is, how many, I know you're a good professional, I don't question that, but I would like to know about how many ADA situations commercially you have done.
Well, every building we deal with has to comply with ADA, whether it's a
Remodel type thing.
remodel. How many? I don't know. I would probably say 50.
Okay.
I mean, it is, we've probably done close, well, I think our project, in 15 years, I've had my own business. I probably have looking at around 300 projects, and I would say at least, it's got to be at least 50 of those have been remodeled that deal with some level of ADA.
Okay.
And some of them vary from very small, single restroom renovations up to, we're dealing with a renovation at Bethany First Church of the Nazarene right now on a renovation of their sanctuary space that we're dealing with ADA. So, I mean, that's a significant building and a significant project in terms of its size and scale. So it varies, but we deal with that from a renovation standpoint a lot, but every new building that we deal with obviously has to comply.
Right, I would expect you to. Then my other question, or comment in bringing up what Mr. Herron has mentioned is that I don't know how many of the council members have actually looked at those plans. I had to wait a little while to get my hands on them to look at them. I did not realize until late that you were going to be here tonight. And I do have some questions that, having dealt with ADA before, that I would like to insert so to speak. Not to change minds, but convince me that this is the only way we need to go.
Okay.
And I think all of this council has some sort of exposure in that area. So I'm inclined to think we need to see those as a whole, if you're interested as a council. And I am with Mr. Herron in that perhaps, I don't know if 2 or 3 months is necessary, but at least give us a couple of council meetings that we can go through those plans corporately or with you individually if we have questions, because this is a ton of citizens' money. And this is just getting is this physically going to get these jobs done? This is just the preparation. This is just the architectural drawings, the engineering requirements. So we still have to spend the money to make it happen.
That's right. And keep in mind that we are working right now with the whole picture.
Right.
And so we're looking at everything that needs to be done. And so even when you're looking back at the percentages, you can't compare it to the 160,000 that might be available now, because we are planning for all of these upgrades, even though not all of them can be built right now with the dollars that we have. So that's another, honestly, one of the challenges that we're dealing with is you're having to spend money up front, but you're only going to see a portion of the results of that based on the amount of dollars you have to spend right now.
Right.
And so the goal would be get as much accomplished as you can get accomplished with the dollars you have, set it on the shelf and wait until you can spend a little more money in the next fiscal year, and then be able to take those dollars and go back out and get some more work done. But I will tell you that will cost more in the end. I mean, I know that you don't have any control over how much money you have to spend, but anytime you phase something, you are having to spend more dollars over the long run to do that. So that's
if
just,
you don't have it, you don't have it.
It's just where you are.
So again, I would entertain that we, even if it's another council meeting or two, that we table this so that we can perhaps look at this more closely.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more short question.
I honestly, I disagree with that, but that doesn't mean we can agree to disagree. The other item on this is, because it will be a multi-phase project, because we don't have the money to just, okay, let's do it and get it done. But when we are tearing into this, we're going to be meeting somewhere else other than in this room, obviously, and how long will that take? And we have, in my opinion, we have citizens that need to have access into this building and this facility that we obviously have put off as a city for a long time, and I don't want to see this fall through the cracks between city managers, and I think the council controls that, and we vote on this, because this isn't getting the whole thing done, obviously, in my opinion. And so the council would hopefully dictate that we've spoken, and this is something we're going to address and do. And there's people that are complaining about this, and I think it's embarrassing that we keep kicking the can down the road. You had a comment to make?
I just had a question.
Sir.
Can I just call you Troy, since I've met you before
Sure.
you went to architecture school?
Long time ago.
Yeah. When did this initiate? Was it, you said 2017?
I believe, my
So-
memory's not great, but I think it's maybe late December or sometime in December of 2017 was when we first
Okay, so
met.
this is the third fiscal year.
Mhm.
Spread that money over that time, but we've had this, the term was kick the can down the road with changes and so forth. But I appreciate that you did take that comprehensive look at the whole building, not just pieces of it, and not just aesthetics, but the structural, the ADA compliancy, all of that. So thank you. That's my only comment.
Mr. Mayor, I've got one more quick comment. Mr. Rhodes, I don't know if you were involved. This may be a question more aligned to staff. My understanding was we had some federal money that was not a competitive grant. It was a given, 50% for ADA upgrades. Is that a correct statement?
I can't speak to the amount, but I do know in some of those early meetings that we had that there was conversation that there were dollars available from the city, and then there were some matching funds or some kind of dollars available from
My
another
understanding
source.
was 50% of the project would be paid for with federal grants, which are non-competitive. They're just there. If it goes for ADA, it's just there. And I would suggest that we pursue that. I don't know if there's any staff here that wants to make a comment on that, but If that money's there, we need to take advantage of it.
That money was part of the CDBG funds. We did not get that money at that time because of reasons I won't go into. That money is available every year. We have to let them know at the first of the year that we want that money and we're interested in that money. I believe that time is around January or February. We did not do that for this year, so it would be next year in January, February, again, before we could tell them that we were interested in our funds for that grant.
And was I right in saying that that is a non-competitive grant? If it's for ADA, you're pretty much going to get it if you just fill out the paperwork?
It is non-competitive. It's a little more than just filling out paperwork, but it is non-competitive. I don't believe it was 50% per se. Each town is awarded a dollar amount. And then that dollar amount fluctuates on which city takes the grant for that year and which one doesn't. So if certain cities don't take the grant, then the cities that do take the grant, their amount of money increases. But I don't know those figures off the top of my head right now.
Mr. Mayor, I would ask that we request staff to pursue that and find out what, we're not that far away from the first of the year. We may get started on this project, but to let that much money, if it's available, not be utilized is, well, we owe it to the citizens to try to get that money.
If you don't mind, Mayor. I think it is important that we look at this whole picture like this, because if we are talking in ADA upgrades, 6, 7, 800,000, that this could be a potential bond issue also, so that we're not spreading it out over 10 phases and costing us more money.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
How long after the approval of this for the documents and engineering and things would it be before construction could begin?
Ready to go. We talked when we first met a few weeks ago that the goal was we didn't know exactly the timing that we would have to get to this point. We talked about trying to be able to get plans ready to go before the end of the year, if not even a little sooner if possible, and then be able to get those drawings out for bidding as quickly as possible after that. There's time constraints required for that for public bidding. One of the things that, I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring that up or not, but one of the things that we discussed is doing a construction management contract as opposed to open in terms of bidding to general contractors. The reason I even bring that up right now is because it does sometimes change the requirements, the bidding requirements, is that if we are working with a construction manager, obviously that's a decision that you guys can make as a council to be able to hire a construction manager to work on the project. But if you do that and go down that road, we can actually, what I always tell our clients, the benefit of hiring a construction manager early, just like you're hiring me now, or potentially hiring me now, to continue this, is that they're on the team just like we are. And we can utilize them to be able to understand what the pricing requirements are, or the pricing allowances are. So we could actually take the drawings that we currently have today and be able to get some estimates, not hard bids, but estimates to understand what maybe that phasing, if we ended up doing phasing, and maybe what that priority level might look like. So one of the things that has been tossed around is we may have 10 different items that we're working on. At some point, we're going to have to pick and choose which ones we do first. Part of it has to do with sequencing and what makes most sense, but some of it might be preference. And so that information from a contracting standpoint would be helpful to understand those priorities. And the only reason I bring that up is because it does affect the time.
Sure.
And so it still goes through the bidding process. So you still have to go through the public advertising and through the public bidding process.
Sure. Thank you. I'll have one follow-up in a second, but Amanda, if I could ask one question of you on the granting that Mr. Councilman Hunter was asking about. If we were to approve this and go ahead into beginning the project, could we still apply for those grant funds after construction has started, or would those funds have to be requested before the project had begun?
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Mr. Mayor?
Were you finished?
No, yeah, go ahead. Yes, that's fine. Go ahead.
So let me get this straight. All we're doing tonight is approving the proposal to hire Troy Roads and Company to complete the plan. In order to actually begin the project, wouldn't we have to budget that in the next fiscal year? Or can we take funds that are available now in this year's budget to begin the process? I know it's $161,000 to approve the plans, but the remainder would be used to begin the project. Is that what we're talking about?
This current budget year does set aside monies to begin this process. And there's a couple things that can be done simultaneously. One is we move forward with this plan and move forward, and then just like with Councilor Larson and Councilor Hunter, is we can look at some grants for handicap, including the community block grants. But we don't want to go to the project contingent on us getting that block grant. I suggest that we do have funds in the budget to begin this process and move forward. I would come back in January or February and maybe reallocate some of the contingency funds aside for matching fund grants that we might be able to do this project, and not delay this and delay this again. We're going to have to do it. So we will have contingency funds, part of which is to get us through the winter for bad weather and all that. So once we emerge out of the bad weather season of January, February, I think that we can reallocate through a budget amendment that you can all reassign some more funds to finish this project until we get to the next fiscal year. And then in the next fiscal year, we can allocate funds to move on.
Well, that sounds feasible to me. Thank you.
Mayor, do you have plans for a committee that would oversee this and report to staff? With an actual working committee? I think
Yes,
that
ma'am.
for a long-term project like this, I think it would add, at least 4 of the council members be on a committee, maybe one from each ward or something, that could have some input, and hopefully some people that have some ADA experience in some way.
To answer your question, I've spoken with one council member of being on that committee, and as well as myself, and I've spoken to 2 citizens that are confined to wheelchairs to also serve on that committee. And that committee could obviously grow to more than just 4 people, obviously. But yeah, that is exactly, because it's not, this issue is not just this building.
I know, speaking as having a handicap
is our
myself.
city as a whole.
Right.
So.
The different handicaps need to be addressed differently. Mine's hearing and mobility a little bit, not like someone that's in a wheelchair. So I think it is advantageous, and you may disagree, you've done this a whole lot more than I have, but that input of what's actually needed I think could be vital. I know it was when we built our house for handicap purposes.
Yeah, I
think
fully
it'd be great.
agree with that, and that's kind of the game plan. This right
Thank
here
you.
tonight was to approve this professional services of this company so that we can do this and quit kicking the can down the road, like I said. I find it embarrassing that we're even considering dragging this out or pausing this personally.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd make a motion to approve proposal for professional services with T. Rhodes and Company for the Bethany City Hall renovations.
Do I have a second? Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 5 is a public hearing item. Consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 1570, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Bethany, Oklahoma, approving, a site plan for development at 6100 Northwest 39th Expressway for Scooters Drive-Through Coffee Shop with certain conditions to be met before issuance of a permit for construction on that property. I believe we have a report as well.
Good evening. Amanda McClellan, Director of Planning and Community Development, for anyone who doesn't know. This is for a site plan approval at 7100 Northwest 39th Expressway that has previously been heard by Planning and Zoning Commission. I'll take you through some of the basics, and then I'll take you through what Planning and Zoning's recommendation was and their conditions. The project is the demolition of the existing building of Bethany Donuts and the new construction of a 557 square foot drive-through coffee kiosk. Some background, the applicant specifically requested that the site plan go through the process of going to planning and zoning and city council for approval. This is made possible per our ordinance that allows for site plans to be approved two separate ways. One would be by the Community Development Director, myself, or the other one to go to Planning and Zoning and City Council for approval. Some background on the business itself. This business began in 1998 out of Nebraska. Currently per their website, and I have since confirmed this, this will be their second location in the state of Oklahoma. Their only other one is currently in Tulsa. They are moving out of the Nebraska area up north, and they're starting to slowly come this way. They did pick Bethany. We did not go out and recruit them. They came to us, and we're very glad that they did. Some staff background, and I will remind you, staff background and staff analysis is the reason that we're here, because there are things with the site plan that staff cannot approve per ordinance, and that is why we are allowed to take it the alternate route, which is Planning and Zoning and City Council, because you can approve things that staff cannot approve. So with that being said, a couple of the issues from the city engineer's analysis was that the right-of-way on North Rockwell doesn't meet current ordinance requirements, and an additional 17 feet of right-of-way would be required to meet ordinance for a total of 50 feet of right-of-way. The existing driveways don't comply with current driveway standard, which is if you took out the driveways and put in new driveways, the approach would need to be concrete. They're currently asphalt. The existing paved areas between the curb and the property lines don't meet current requirements. Once again, if you were to do any work there and rip it out, put it back in, it would require concrete. It's currently asphalt. The site plan does not have any sidewalks on it. Our current ordinance says that when you come in and put in a new development, that we do require 6-foot sidewalks along the property with ADA compliant ramps where they're needed. And then the other issue was there was no drainage calculations presented with the first site plan. They have since been turned in. Mr. Caton does have those drainage calculations and has signed off on them. So they have got those turned in since Planning and Zoning. From the community development standpoint, off-street parking, our ordinance, even with our Title 15 update, we did not have anything that was for just drive-through businesses. This is not a drive-in, but it's a drive-through. There won't be any people coming in off the street. So with that being said, we classified this as commercial service not otherwise classified. That would require six spots per 1,000 square feet. Since it's 500 square feet, my recommendation was that their parking spots would meet the requirements, because they have 4. So a landscaping plan wasn't submitted. We did talk about that when they turned in the site plan, and they will be submitting their landscaping plan with their architectural drawings. They were really just wanting to get this on the agenda and get it through the process, because they are very excited about getting started. Once again, we don't feel like parking with the site plan is going to be an issue whatsoever. Some images. This is what's there now. Probably everyone's pretty familiar with the yellow donut shop there on the corner. And the site plan, which I believe is in all of your packets, that was submitted. And then these are pictures of what will be going up in the place of the little yellow donut shop. This is pretty standard for what they put up and what their branding is and what their locations look like. P&Z approved the site plan with 7 conditions, and I believe y'all have the resolution in your packet. But I'm going to go through a couple of those and tell you the developer has since given comments back to some of the requests of Planning and Zoning. The driveway approaches and curb cuts shall be subject to approval of the building inspector. That's what Planning and Zoning asked, which is fine. Scooters is not proposing any construction within the right-of-way along 39th Expressway. They're not planning on tearing anything out and putting down anything new. Is my understanding. They're leaving the driveways as they are. They're leaving the right-of-ways as they are. They're not planning on doing any work on those areas, which takes into account the next one. All reconstruction of paving on public right-of-ways will comply with Bethany standard. They're not proposing any construction or public improvements within the right-of-way, so therefore it won't be an issue. The only thing I might ask council to consider tonight, and obviously it will be up to you, but the applicant has asked that you consider, is the condition for 6-foot wide sidewalks being constructed for this build. The developer and the business feel that the site plan doesn't propose any public improvements, and that if they do put in sidewalks along Rockwell and 39th, it is going to cause additional grading problems. It's going to cause additional slope problems. If they add sidewalks, it's going to require them to come in and remove pavement and remove the driveway approach and do additional grading, which is going to cause additional time and additional costs that they were not planning on doing, because they were planning on leaving the driveway approaches and the parking lot and everything as is, the right-of-ways as is. And so they do ask that you consider waiving that that requirement of planning and zoning. That'll totally be up to you. Like I said, the drainage calculation has been provided. Mr. Caton has looked that over, given it his stamp of approval. He's fine with the drainage study. The other conditions from planning and zoning that I don't have up there were that off-street parking of 3 standard parking spots and 1 handicap parking space as shown on the site plan are approved pursuant to recommendation of the P&Z Commission. Landscaping for the project shall be provided in accordance with the provisions of the Bethany Code of Ordinances. And the last one was that no additional right-of-way dedication is required along the eastern boundary of the property, since in 1980 an additional 7 feet of right-of-way was acquired by eminent domain proceedings when Rockwell was widened, channelized, and signalized. So they're not requiring any additional right-of-way to meet the 50 feet. And with that, that was the recommendation of planning and zoning.
I have a
Look at this.
question. Sorry.
Sorry. Did I hear right that there have been a precedents kind of set with other areas in Bethany or Bethany businesses?
Yes, sir.
Can you
The same thing
elaborate on
for,
that?
yes, sir. The same thing for the right-of-way, and not requiring the additional right-of-way was also granted for the Sears development, is my understanding. Mr. Davis said the same thing, and the same consideration was given for the Sears development when they came in, because requiring the additional right-of-way would have meant the project could not have happened. That will be the same in this case. If we require the additional 17 feet of right-of-way, they won't be able to build.
And P&Z unanimously voted to?
They unanimously, yes, sir, unanimously voted.
And
yes.
your staff recommendation is?
Staff recommends to approve this, yeah.
Sorry.
So, okay, I think you said 7 contingencies came from P&Z.
Yes.
I'm only counting 6 bullet points.
Yes,
So that, I was confused about that.
Sorry, on there, I didn't
First.
put them all on there. I only put the ones on the PowerPoint presentation that Scooters had comments in response to. The 7th one on your resolution here is going to be, that I didn't talk about on the PowerPoint, is not requiring that additional 17 feet of right-of-way.
Just to clarify,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I think we've gotten to the point, if we're going to give a variance on every business that comes into the city, we might as well just get rid of the ordinances. It would make it a lot simpler not to have an ordinance that we're going to give a variance on every single time. The sidewalk is a good example. I've looked at that site. The elevation of that site is going to be the slope is going to be too much for sidewalks, so you're right, they're going to have to bring it up, cut it out, and, you know, they don't want to do that because they want to save money. But if we're going to give a variance to every business that asks for it, why have an ordinance? Let's change the ordinance. It doesn't make any sense to continue to do this. Then staff could approve these. They wouldn't be coming before us. You know, can you go back to the kiosk there, or the elevation? The other one.
How far
Right
back?
there.
Okay.
You know, the way that one's sitting right now, that car is almost on the right-of-way on Rockwell. And it's got nowhere to go. It can just go out and make a turn and try to get back on 39th Street. That is going to be a tremendous bottleneck at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Is that trying to get back out on Rockwell or back out like the way the drive
Isn't
is?
that a right turn there as well?
Is that coming off of 39th then
That,
going around the
that
back
drive,
like it
that
sets.
drive would be on the east side, would be on the Rockwell side. Are they conducive to flipping that around so they can come in off Rockwell and go back out, or off 39th Street and go back down to Rockwell?
I have Dan Forslund here tonight. He is the project manager for scooters, and he can probably answer some of those questions, what they are and are not willing to do. I don't
Oh,
want to
great,
speak for them.
great. Don't jump to any conclusions. We want you to come to town now. so.
So yes, thank you, Amanda, for that presentation. So my name is Dan Forsland. I'm with Scooter's development team with their corporate offices. So I'm sorry, sir, your question to flip the building, to be quite honest, I'd have to go back and look at that. We did spend some time designing the current building. We do have landlord approval on the current layout, and I personally think this layout works best. I do not believe that vehicles in our queue can then take an immediate right turn. The entrance off of Rockwell is a little further south, so vehicles will have to either turn left and then to turn right on 39th, or do a U-turn to exit onto Rockwell.
It's right on the intersection, and you know, that's a state highway. 39th Street is not, once we approve, the state will not approve it unless we approve it. And
Correct.
those driveways, my understanding is that has to be approved by the city engineer, not the city inspector. So,
Mr. Caton can make certain people his designee, and the city inspectors are his designee per ordinance for driveways and driveway permits
I
at this
understand that, but
time.
he's done the engineering and he will sign off with the state
I
for
can't
that-
answer that.
for exiting out on that one driveway. If they're not
Mr.
gonna
Caton?
change the drive, yes.
I can't answer that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're fine.
P&Z unanimously approved it. Staff approves it. We're thankful that Bethany is finally open for business and we have people actually coming to us. And it's been said by several of us up here before that staff are the experts that get paid to do what they do. And I would approve this.
Could I ask a question, please?
Yes.
We had some similar situations when the coffee shop went in at 39th and Council. Has staff talked to anybody or heard from anybody about traffic issue in that area? And if so, just from a layperson observation, the access that's available there, which it's coming east on the highway, is a right turn. And I think that, is that a right turn there, or is that a straight through at that point on Rockwell? Council is a right turn, but is Rockwell a right turn, or is it a straight line
It's a right turn.
into this property? At the intersection of Rockwell and 39th? Is the South
I think
Street,
he's asking, is there a right turn lane?
is it a right turn
Well,
only?
There is.
Okay. Regardless, my question is, at 7 o'clock, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, or whatever other time of the day, there's a concern with traffic backup. And we're talking about a highway at a prime time of the morning or afternoon. I do have some issues about where all those cars are going to get in there and stay there and not be on the highway and block traffic. Now, I want to give credit to staff and to you for having the knowledge of how these things go, but we have experience in the city with this, and I'm just curious if anybody has talked to that business, or if you have heard from any businesses about that. I'm on board with the mayor to get this to happen, but I don't want you to spend all that money to put that building in there and have traffic issues.
For one, is your building, will it be the same size as the building that is currently there that's running traffic, people buying dozens of donuts and getting back out on Rockwell or 39th Street? I'm
Their drive
slightly
is the other
smaller.
direction.
Okay.
And we would actually pull our building away from Rockwell, which that current building sits right on top of.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, I just asked a question. I was waiting for him to
Okay.
answer it first. So your building is quite a bit smaller, correct?
It is smaller, yes.
Can you describe the traffic flow? I mean, I've got the diagram, so it looks like if you had a customer come into your facility, he would come in from the south, turn into the establishment, go to the north, go through the drive-through, do a U-turn around your business, and then go back south towards Rockwell. Is that correct?
So I think we should attack the question from both directions. So vehicles coming from west to east on 39th Expressway. First of all, vehicles heading east to west cannot enter our property on 39th because there is a median.
Okay.
So there is no left turn access.
So the only place somebody would come in, let's say they're coming from Yukon, going towards Bethany, they would turn to the right and come around and go to the back of your facility through the drive-through and then go towards the north. Is that fair?
I'm sorry, Yukon, I'm not familiar with that street.
Yeah. It's
Okay, to the town. I am from Omaha,
That's the
sorry.
west to east.
If you're coming from the west.
If you're coming from the west,
On Northwest 39.
yes,
You can't, that's the only way you can get access to the facility, correct?
that and Rockwell, but
Right,
yes, on
okay.
39th, yes.
So if you're coming from the west, which is from Yukon,
Got it.
on historic Route 66, which you should check out, I'll be happy to give you a tour. Mr. Westmoreland is an excellent tour guide. Come in, you would have to take a, let's say that would be a right turn,
Correct,
and then you would come around and go to the back of your building. come
Correct.
Through, and then you would go north to go through the drive-through.
that is correct, yes.
And then at that point, once you've completed the order, where would the vehicle go? Would it do a U-turn?
So the vehicle at that point, we do have an exit lane along where you're currently seeing the cars stacking. So vehicles, first of all, that aren't entering our queue do have room to exit, but vehicles that after they've picked up their coffee, they could either loop around our building and then turn right again, heading outside of the 39th Expressway, heading east, or they could do a U-turn and then exit on Rockwell, heading south.
Okay, so that's the traffic. That's the traffic
Right.
flow. I mean, we've all been to Chick-fil-A. I don't know how Chick-fil-A does it, but they have traffic issues in their drive-throughs, and they've been able to negotiate that. Obviously, you have a capability to do the same thing to the extent that you can direct traffic pretty much where you want it to go under the circumstances. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. With directional signs, we can direct traffic. And I do want to say certain things about our business. This is not a Chick-fil-A or a fast food restaurant where the order time is much longer in the queue because you're ordering, I don't know, 5 to 6 items of food. We actually had an industrial survey by a company called Profitality, and they studied 3 of our busiest locations in Omaha that are very comparable to the traffic counts at this location. At the busiest day of the week, which is Friday, we average around 29 cars, which closely aligns with the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, which classifies scooters around 25 cars an hour. Of those 25 cars, the average order time at our menu was 33 seconds, and the average pickup time was 44 seconds. So our concept being that people are showing up for coffee, they know exactly what they want, especially after that first week, once they know our menu. They know the drink they want. They're in and out in under a minute to 15 seconds. So that I think alone significantly helps the traffic flow.
And this, safe to say, this isn't your third or fourth one of these that you're trying to see if it works. You've got quite a few of these in operation currently.
Correct, yes. And the concerns usually are traffic, and we have found usually those concerns are without merit. Our model is, the impact to traffic we have found is not significant.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
The sidewalk issue. Now, staff, is that because of the new Title 15, or is that an existing ordinance? Or do we know? Both? Okay. So a 6-foot wide sidewalk that's going to be in the right-of-way, and it would be surrounding this facility. Even if they wanted to do that, how would that work if they had to do it?
Our engineers could not come up with a solution in the time period that we had to present to get ready. So they,
that ordinance is not feasible for this location, given that specific
And
requirement
given the
for
grading,
sidewalks.
I don't know how we could make it work.
It doesn't seem to be in this particular situation and talking to their engineers and architects since the Planning and Zoning Commission met.
What was planning and zoning's response to that? What was,
At the time, Planning and Zoning, and I have Planning and Zoning Commissioners here too, had just made the request that sidewalks be put in. Since then, I'd sent those comments on to Dan and his team so they could start working on the site plan and seeing how they could lay things in. And it was after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting that they've since come back and said this just doesn't really seem feasible for what we're trying to do here.
so I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, the planning and zoning recommended sidewalks, but they didn't get an opportunity to look at the new proposal from the business.
That is correct. Yes.
Look, what was the, sorry,
No, go ahead.
what was the proposal width of sidewalk?
6 foot.
Well, that's what's in the ordinance.
Yes.
But is the proposal no sidewalk, 3-foot sidewalk? Where were we?
Dan's team and architects have come back and requested no sidewalks,
Okay.
if possible.
Now, I just wanted to
Yes, sir.
clarify that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mayor?
Planning and zoning did request the sidewalks. The recommendation was.
They did request sidewalks. They have not seen the applicant's comments after the request was made.
When you say it's not feasible from an engineering standpoint, what you're really saying is you don't want to bring the elevation up on that
Well,
whole
it's-
site to accommodate the new sidewalk elevation, right?
Yes, I would say that that is correct to an extent. So as the site plan is currently presented, we would have to excavate roughly 3,400 square feet of concrete to replace the asphalt in the right-of-way only, keeping the existing grading, which does not meet the sidewalk requirement of 2% slope. It would be a 4% slope. That would be an additional 4,000 square feet of concrete. To bring the site to grade, my engineers are telling me that with the way this site's currently laid out, we would actually have to demolish the entire parking lot, which is over 16,000 square feet of concrete. And at that point, given this small project, it would not fit within our business model.
Mr. Aaron, you had something you were going to say?
I think this is a great use for this corner. It would help revitalize this corner. My biggest concern is all we talk about up here is sidewalks and wanting to put them in. So what happens if this goes in and then, in fact, recently with the TIF, we're talking about access down to the lake. So then if the city comes in and we want to start putting in sidewalks, then we have to deal with this and figure out how to make this happen. So, I mean, I would take it with P&Z recommendations and leave the sidewalk requirement in there. And I, like I said, I think this is a good use for this corner lot that's difficult to get something out of. But I mean, that's so much of our talk and our comp plan is about sidewalks. I really feel it's necessary to somehow figure out how we can keep sidewalks in this project.
With a 4% slope, it's not ADA compliant.
Correct. So if it was as simple as coming in there and cutting in a sidewalk, I'd be all for it. When the engineers came back and said it's not compatible with the 4% existing slope, I don't have a solution. If we were to have to add sidewalks, I'm not sure how we can make it work.
But then we're right back to not being ADA compliant, and we're talking about trying to make our city ADA compliant. Sidewalks is a part of that.
I mean, I will say that the existing building, of course, is grandfathered in. I think our building looks a lot better.
It does. Agreed. Thank you.
That's not saying another tenant can't come in, and you still have the same issue if you wanted to come back and add sidewalks, dealing with an existing tenant.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, you know, because bottom line is our lifeblood is what? Sales tax. We need to be open for business and quit pushing them away, in my opinion.
I
We
think
need to be ADA compliant.
I also think-
We need sidewalks. We have established several TIF boundaries. you know, so maybe there's options
Is
there.
this within the TIF boundary?
Yes, it is. Hank Moore, Economic Development Director. One of the things, common sense, is that this is already a early morning facility. We're just replacing what's already there. The DOT cutouts are there. They're already approved. We don't have to go back and get reapproval or re-engineering. They're there. They're just making use of there. This site also has a secondary exit entrance on 39th Street, the street behind it. So it's unique in the sense that it has 3 street frontages. It's replacing a structure that we all agree could be better, would make a better impression with what Scooters is doing. The other thing that's not being discussed is that that entire parking lot is paved. So anyone in a wheelchair can cross any part of that parking lot from street corner to street corner to street corner. There is not a handicap access off of Rockwell and 39th Street, the back entrance. There is on the corner opposite OnQ. I would suggest that perhaps we enter into an agreement that, like you said, when we do the TIF, that's going to be a 10-foot sidewalk. That's not going to be a 6-foot sidewalk. That maybe they agree to stripe the 6-foot wide on the asphalt as it is, with the contingent that when we get ready to come in through a 10-foot sidewalk through the TIF, that they cost share a percentage of that, as well as extending the sidewalk down Rockwell. Because right now, when you go to Rockwell, you go to that next block, there's no sidewalk. It just drops off into the street across from Swabley's. So I would hate to lose a national chain like this, replacing something that's already there with the same amount of traffic for a sidewalk. But we can find a compromise using what's existing there for paving, with the idea that when we come through with the TIF sidewalk public project, that they would participate and they would be fully ADA compliant at that time.
Another question or comment. So I was going to mention, I've walked that parking lot. That's the way I would go if it were me, but everybody won't do that. But my question, is there currently a crosswalk there?
There's a crosswalk going over to the OnQ, yes.
Okay.
That's where we already have a handicap accessible ramp.
Well, I like that potential compromise, though.
Mr. Mayor?
So Mr. Moore, you just brought up something, so we're talking about on that side of the street actually doing a 10-foot sidewalk?
Well, if we're going to do, as we're talking about the
10-foot
trail,
pathway
it's
on
going to
the
be
10?
more than 6 foot, because we're going to want it to be bikes. So it's either going to be 8, 9, or 10 foot wide.
So how would that fit within this site plan?
We would have to make the adjustment through there with their cooperation, maybe modifying the landscaping on the front.
So how could we make that adjustment once it's all done, but they can't make that adjustment now?
The adjustment is that we can work with the elevation of the sidewalk to help with the grading of it to be ADA compliant. If you're going to ask them to excavate the parking lot to be ADA compliant, to have the 1 or 2% pitch, you're probably going to lose the project. Because
I'm still not following you. How
If
would
they can't
we?
do it, how are you going to do it?
Huh?
If they can't do it, we can't do it. It's not practical, it's not feasible, it's not economically feasible.
And I'm sorry, I hate to keep beating the horse, but I'm just trying to understand. And we don't want to hurt ourselves, since this is a potential path that we're wanting to do maybe in the next couple of years.
Mr. Mayor? It's my understanding that the whole parking lot is going to be concrete, right?
Only the area we're excavating.
Okay, so,
Around our
but
building.
what it is now, it's existing pavement. There is no sidewalk.
It's existing asphalt with
So,
no,
I don't even know what a sidewalk would look like, because you're not going to have any kind of greenery, grass, or anything. It's going to be paved and concrete throughout the whole area, correct?
no, we are proposing leaving the existing asphalt.
Right, so that's already been paved, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if you were to put in a sidewalk, you would, what, put it over the already paved asphalt?
Well, we'd have to tear it out and get the grading right, because you can't install a sidewalk with the current slope there. I mean, we're definitely open to trying to engineer the site for a future TIF sidewalk. I'd want to see what that impacts, if it snowballs certain things, but I don't want to design a site that isn't compliant with your future plans either.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
may I make a motion that if we pass this, or that we pass this, and that it will include the P&Z recommendations?
Do I have a second?
I don't want to damage this project going forward, but I would like to see, is there not some options for it to fit right in with our future trail sidewalk.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
we don't know what our future trail, I mean, we may have a trail on the other side of Route 66. We may have a trail down the middle of Route 66. So to say that, you know, we don't know where or how those parameters are going to be set under the TIF agree, you know, if we do have a TIF in that area. So to say, you know, we're going to prevent this project from happening when we don't know where we're going to put access to Stinchcomb or whatever the bicycle route area, you know, that's a little premature. We can't predict the future. However, we could make accommodations. If this business is here, then we can overcompensate or find a way to work through this situation under the future project with those considerations to look at and, you know, put in place. I think we've got options here. This isn't going to limit us in any way.
Thank you. So I hate interrupting because there was a motion made, and it's still waiting a second, but I did want to go back to the fact that this is a public hearing item, and I don't know if we've already opened it to the public to hear their commentary.
We have not. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this?
Yes, I have a couple of concerns. The first one.
Sorry, could you speak
Yes.
your name and your address, or give your address? to
I
Mrs.
will. Yeah, I'm Chris Davis, Ward 4. The first comment that was made was for people who are in wheelchairs or needing that kind of access, the comment was made that they can just cut through the parking lot. With the amount of vehicle traffic that's going to be traveling through there, that's not a safe option to consider. And I hope everybody will realize that within proximity to this, there are, I see a lot of individuals within this vicinity who are traveling by wheelchair, and we just need to do the best that we can to assure that their safety is our top priority. The second question I have is, and probably Councilman Hunter can answer this, is with the proximity of this to the fire station, a left turn off of Rockwell into this facility concerns me because I just fear that, there's going to be a bottleneck situation created there, and in the event of an emergency, will the fire trucks be able to access Rockwell and travel through that intersection, given that this is a heavily vehicle-driven business?
I don't think it would be any worse than what it was with any of the donut shop or Allen's hamburger shop. There's been other entities in there, and we never saw a problem with that. When we turn the lights and the sirens on, normally people move.
Okay.
Big challenge, right? Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to address this?
Chris Powell, 6211 Northwest 31st Terrace. The one thing that I see looking at this, and when I first came to Bethany, it was Steve's, or Allen's, I guess is what it was called then. And I've seen the different things that have gone in there, and in being familiar with that corner, the thing that jumps out to me is that it looks like that the area will be more traversable after this is done than it is now. The footprint of this building, as I understood them to say, was smaller, and it's also, if it's all the paving that's going to be done and everything, it seems to me that it's going to be easier for people to get around. And the vehicle count that the gentleman mentioned of about 29 vehicles in the mornings would be something that I would not see that as being very, very much of an obstacle. I would think that the donut shop probably has something fairly close to that now. So I would be interested to hear some discussion of what the opinion is as far as what it would be with people being able to get around on foot or in a wheelchair compared to what we have now, which is not the most stable and safe surface.
Is there anyone else? We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Can we repeat the motion as was stated, please?
Motion to approve resolution number 1570. Meeting certain conditions would be met before issuance of a permit for construction on the property is the motion that we have.
Mr. Mayor, may I clarify that for a little bit?
Yeah.
That would include all 7 recommendations from P&Z, which would be the sidewalk requirement, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's the pending motion.
That is the pending motion. And I do not have a second. How long do I have to wait before the motion dies? Okay, the motion is dead. Do I have a motion to approve? Can I make a motion to approve minus the sidewalk?
So moved.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
And before I forget and move on to the next item, I was, if I may, I was driving west on 39th Street, crossing Rockwell the other evening, and there was a gentleman in a wheelchair coming out of the parking lot of OnQ in the, where you normally would turn in with your vehicle and coming down to get to the curb cut in the median and crosswalk to cross over to the south side of 39th Street. And I believe it's because there is a curb cut and a sidewalk on the corner where OnQ is, but it's just an arch going from, you know, across Rockwell and then over to turn. I don't know that there's actually access to get from the parking lot, somebody in a wheelchair to get from the parking lot to the sidewalk without going around in the street. So that seemed a little troubling to me. Item 6, consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 1572, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Bethany, Oklahoma, approving the increase of solid waste rates. And we have a presentation or report.
I am not going to do a full presentation, but I have some slides available to back up any of the data that we need to look at. The 1st of August, the council received a presentation and a brief report from the LEAF Task Force, or LEAF Committee. And in that effort, they took the time, and we went through nine different meetings. And they primarily looked at how we're going to do leaves, but then they looked at more of the sanitation operation, or solid waste as we call it. I would like to again publicly thank them for their efforts and for their diligence and passion. I would say that the last meeting was a little animated, but we'll leave it at that. They came forth with a recommendation on some operational things that we would like to consider differently. And before we get into the rate increase, we looked at big trash, which in the recent year we've expanded to being 4 times a year. We addressed the leaf collection on how to do that equitably across the city. And their recommendation basically is to merge it with the 4th big trash day. And we recently had that date moved back to December. They also propose being able to drop off leaves in the back of a pickup truck, and the rates were established and are maintained. We looked at the ability for the city to sell bags at $3 and being an inclusive price, and then once they fill the bags, they would buy the bags at a set location or locations, and then the city would go and pick them up, and there would be no further charge to the residents. The other opportunity to address the leaves was for the residents to take advantage of the seasonal poly carts at $7.50 per poly cart. Ronnie Bacon had done a demonstration where you could get 6 bags of leaves mulched up would fit into a poly cart. So the ability to use poly carts to help dispose of the leaves is one option. The other was we could go in and charge, and what we've looked at is that we would do a separate pickup, include the first 4 yards of solid waste, and then we would just charge a per yard charge. Right now, I believe it's $7, and we need to move that up some, maybe to $7.50. Overall, they were concerned about the fact that economically the department was not being able to be sustained financially to equip itself now and into the future. And they kind of looked at the way of doing that, and they came up with the $20 per residence per month increase. I mean, utility rate, an increase of $3.40. Of that $3.40, they would like to see $1.50 of that earmarked for truck and equipment to provide the services, such as the grapple truck, skid steer, dump trailers, things like that. And then the balance of $1 would be to help offset the cost of services like Big Trash, which was an expanded service that we hadn't done before beyond once or twice a year. It's just a way for them to be able to buy more polycarts, more trash dumpsters, and be able to keep themselves financially significantly sustained so that they don't have to go to the CIP fund to buy things. In the recent past, we bought 3 sanitation trucks and I don't know, several thousand polycarts at a tune of about $1.2 million. The department didn't have the revenue to set aside for a period of years to build an escrow account to be able to do that. Instead, they had to come back to City Council, and the City Council had to allocate funds out of the CIP funds to buy something that should be considered a departmental expense. It can be done differently, and again, I think they saw the need to raise the rate $3.40 to a level of $20 per month. So I know one of the first questions to be anticipated is what do other cities charge? And they charge anywhere from $15 to $41 per month for trash service for residents. The $20 falls exactly midpoint. In fact, there's 3 cities within 10 or 15 cents of $20, so that would be the midpoint. The $20 also represents what 1660 is worth 11 years ago when we had the last solid waste increase. If you took an extrapolation of COLA, which people on senior citizen income get, the COLA would be almost 17–18%, which would be almost $20. So it's comparable to that. The other part is that it's comparable to is just the cost of the operation. The city is dependent upon the utility surplus revenues to help offset general fund expenses related to non-revenue producing departments. This increase will help sanitation, solid waste contribute more to the general fund and start putting monies aside to be able to do equipment replacement, pickup truck replacement, grapple truck replacement, and all the equipment they need without having to come for special appropriations. It's pay now or pay later, and I think this is a different way of looking at it. Let's set the money aside, so let's pass the cost of providing the service, the city service, to the city residents. They expect the city pay for itself, and that this is just one of the ways to do that. I also took the $20 and ran it across the schedule on that was included in your packet, because the other rates that were raised to $20 are all of the rates that are based upon the residential rate. That would be the per apartment cost, the per nursing home room cost, and that would help us establish a revenue stream that would allow us to move the equipment forward and not be playing catch up all the time. The other thing is that it still allows 90 cents of every month utility bill to go towards the general fund, which would help offset other increases in expenses that the city faces. So without getting into the weeds too much, I'll start to try to entertain any of the questions the council may have, or the public.
Anybody have any questions?
I've got a question for council. Can we earmark funds like this, or does everything have to go into the general fund and then be dispersed again? We can't earmark this for certain.
Why not?
Well, I'm asking.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, we allocate, I'm looking at my last statement, and we allocate $3 to stormwater drainage. It's my understanding that goes into the general fund. It's not allocated separate and independent for that particular charge. Is that true?
Currently, it is. One of the things that we want to do, and it'll be the same as what we do here at Solid Waste, is that we propose in the spirit of transparency, like the stormwater, that the $3 comes in and is treated as stormwater, and that when Public Works goes out and does a stormwater project, that we will bill an invoice to ourselves for the cost of labor, machinery hours, and things, cost of dispose of limbs and stuff that are in the drainage ditches, that we will begin to be more transparent on the revenues coming in against the expenses associated with, and then the surplus can go into the general fund. The same would be true with the solid waste, is that we would have a line item coming in on the revenue side, dedicated funding, and then we would propose to do some bookkeeping and invoicing so that we can track the expenses against the revenues so that the people can follow that.
But the issue is, if we had a stormwater drainage issue now, that would have to come out of the general fund.
The way it is now, yes, because we haven't earmarked those funds to being just public works funds, yes.
When was the stormwater earmarked? Do we know? When was that done?
Well, I thought it was, the interesting part is I thought it was $1.50 on my bill, and then last month it was $3.
So at some point in time, some council voted to earmark stormwater on the utility bill, but then it went into the general fund, and it wasn't earmarked for stormwater.
That's the way it was not done, and what we've been proposing is we want to do it that way.
Yeah, so how do we guarantee that that never happens again? So if we vote to earmark these funds, it actually happens and doesn't turn into that scenario.
And then what we'll do is we'll come back at a later date to address the stormwater resolution to do the same thing. Because we'll have to come back with another resolution and approach on the outside haulers. We're still working on that as a legal document. So we are still working on that. It's just we're not ready to present it tonight.
If I could comment on that, I think, Councilman Palmer, that what Berkeley would do is to put up a separate account that showed the income coming in that's dedicated for public works. It would theoretically be in the general fund, but he would segregate that account and he would have a separate accounting on that. And then when things came due, such as purchasing a truck or more trash cans or that sort of thing, it would come out of that particular fund. So it would be segregated, so it would not go into the general fund for general use.
And I think that's a great way to handle the processing of the expenses, so that there's some transparency and accountability. And if anybody wanted to know what that amount was or where it was being put or how it was being spent, we could track it. And I mean, I've looked at that budget, took some Tylenol and got over my headache, but this would be a good way to allow that to happen. I guess my other follow-up question, if I may, Mr. Mayor, so is this on average a 5% increase across the board to every resident for sanitation?
I don't think, yes, it would be across the board. And then the other component that the LEAF Task Force asked for, once you make the rate adjustment, let's just say it's enacted for 60 days out, December 1st. At some point, when we go into the budget year beginning July 1, is that maybe we set across the utilities a 2% increment increase that falls automatically. The councils of the past had that at some point and then pulled it off. Had they maintained a 2% increment 11 years ago, we would be at this rate right now.
So minus the leaves, how much is the bill going to go up for each resident related to sanitation? $4 and some odd dollars?
$3.40.
Okay.
And out of that, they'll get the leaf. Well, they'll get the quarterly big trash, which is something we evolved into in the last year and a half or so. But also with the limbs and things, they'll get the first 4 yards included in their bill, and then we'll just charge the per yard cost above the 4 yards. I have an example where during big trash, we allow 12 cubic yards to be free, and then we charge after that. And we had one instance where a church had an excessive amount, and their bill was $700 because of the time and the effort to take all that to the landfill. The other part of this is that the biggest expense that is not ever going to reduce is the cost of the landfill charge. Right now, when this rate was established 11 years ago, we were paying $6 per yard at the landfill. Right now, we're at $6.97, and in January, it will go over $7. We are only charging $7 now for excessive yardage. So we need to move that up maybe 50 cents, but at one point, it was a $1 difference, and we cannibalized that. And this is where it's hurt the department on having financial resources for themselves, as well as being able to contribute to the general fund for increased costs on the non-revenue producing departments.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more comment. I'm uncomfortable with the idea. I know we need to raise rates. I understand that. However, I've gotten a bunch of phone calls about, I don't understand this. I don't know why we're doing it now. I had branches from the last storm that I had to pay for. I didn't know how much that cost. I got a big bill and it was a problem. So I think this needs to happen. I just don't feel comfortable with the level of education that the residents have related to this issue. And I think there may be a disconnect between the raising of the rates and then the charging for the leaves.
Well, I think that we can do both things. I think that passing the resolution maybe for a December 1st or a January 1 implementation date will give us 60 days, 90 days to fully explain how the service works and what benefits they're getting. Because in all reality, they're getting 12 yards of extra per quarter on top of their service bill. Right. So the idea is we can do an education. The other thing that the LEAF committee wanted to stress is that we need to have some educational programs for mulching and composting and some other ways of reducing the volume. Our tipping fees this year will exceed $700,000.
Well, I still think you have the issue of, I used to have 2 pickups, and now I have 1 pickup, and I have 2 poly carts, and I have twice as much trash. I mean, that whole issue has not been resolved, and I don't know how. Is it an education issue?
I do believe it's an education issue.
Because some of the people in town are like, you cut my benefit, you cut my services in half. But in reality, that's probably not the situation. It's just we're coming up with a new system. Is that a fair statement?
I would think so. And the reason that they did the second poly cart at only $2.50 is that because the public was unsure of what they would really need with a 96-gallon poly cart and what they could get in it. So it was a bargain for $2.50 for the second cart. But the cost of removing that increased, as did the tipping fees at the landfill.
Well, the other issue is we haven't even gone through the leaf season, so we really don't know how that's going to play out given this new policy and how we're going to pay for it.
So essentially, because of your one question that's going on, I agree. We need to educate the citizens. We all agree, I believe, or I agree, that this needs to take place because we got to pay for things and they don't give it away for free. And the other point that I'd like to make is that this was a citizen committee that was formed to look at this, and they brought this back and agreed this needs to be increased.
And staff, and we did the research about what it's costing us. We looked at how we're disposing of it. We looked at the cost of the equipment. I looked at what the comparables are with the other communities. But in the bottom line, Bethany residents have to pay for Bethany services. And we increase our expenses. And this utility has not been raised in 11 years. There is nothing in the city budget that has not been raised in 11 years in costs. We only have 4 utilities that we can raise funds from for surplus plus the sales tax. So this is the most outstanding utility that has not been raised. So it's subject to being a jump. Unfortunately, the jump doesn't need to always be there if we have an annual increment, but we can't start behind the 8 ball, starting at 2% now and expect us to catch up. It'll be just the 2% will allow us to maintain.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Couple questions. Since we have gone to 1 day a week pickup, have we saved any money doing that? We're driving less. Are we driving less? Is it less manpower? Have we been able to cut out a route because of that?
We have not been able to cut out a route.
I realize landfill is virtually the same, but we're only passing by homes once a week now. Have we been able to save anything in that
The numbers would
department?
show that the personnel overall cost has remained constant, that it's not as accelerating as fast as any of the other departments. Part of it is because we have employees who are topped out at their levels. But the other is we have savings. And the fifth day of the week, Wednesday, is primarily for them to do maintenance and cleaning of the trucks and things like that, and to go out and handle calls as someone needs extra assistance. So we actually have been able to do better service with this type of format. The other part of that is I don't think that we've had as near the amount of money in workers' comp, slips and falls, back injuries, sprains, strains, and things like that. I don't have a firm number from you. That's something I have to go through the insurance company, but just the appearance, talking to Linda who files those claims,
Yeah.
we haven't had as much as we've had in the past.
So my next question would be, over a 20-year period, what is your equipment cost? And will this $1.50 earmarked, will that cover that equipment cost over a 20-year period?
Yes, it will. I can't tell you what the past 20 years equipment cost is, because, well, we have a grapple truck that's 20 years old that needs to be replaced, and it's $200,000. I think with the allocation of the $1.50, just by itself, we could extrapolate that we would raise revenues in about 2 years to pay for a new grapple truck. The beauty of that is that if we got that revenue come in, we may be able to go to equipment leasing and purchase a truck and do it on payments against that revenue, but not without a revenue increase.
How many customers have a second cart?
About 450.
450 have a second
About
cart?
that number, I think, Ronnie?
I'm kind of
Yeah. It's not as much as I thought it was, to be honest with you.
So what we haven't mentioned in this discussion is that the second cart is going to double to $5.
Right.
So effectively, for any homes that have 2 carts, compared to a year ago, your rates are actually going up 50%, $8.40.
Well, the $5, raising it from $2.50 to $5 is actually really just covering the cost of disposing of that second poly cart.
I don't follow that.
If you take a poly cart and pick it up 4 times a month, you're gonna have more than 2 yards of trash. So you're gonna have 2 yards of trash at $7 a yard, it's $14.
I think that could probably be debated a little bit. A poly cart is less than a half yard, but it probably compacts down to a couple of square feet, I would imagine. But that's for customers with 2 carts, a 50% increase over a course of a year is very significant.
Are you talking about
50% on that one cart? Is that what
No, overall. If you go back to a year ago,
It's $2.50.
no, go back to a year ago, we had unlimited pickup. You were just paying a flat $16.60.
Correct.
So right now, underneath this, you'd be $25
Versus 19.
which is an additional $8.40, which is exactly 50% increase.
But it's not a 50% increase, because the $16.60
It is.
plus the $2.50 gives you $19. 19 into the 25 makes a $6 difference. Makes it about a 33% increase.
Not going back a year ago, it's truly exactly 50%.
Yeah, he's talking about prior to the poly cart,
Yeah.
where some people had 15 trash cans.
I do like the idea that we're going to earmark for trucks and equipment. I think that's a very good thing to do. I think that's a substantial raise, and I still, for one, and I think my constituents, I don't think several of them, this would be a good time with this rate increase is to possibly increase our big trash service. That's still kind of fluctuating, and we haven't gone through this leaf season yet to see how that's going to work out. But this may be a prime time to increase our big trash to either monthly or every other month. I think we can maybe look into when the trash guys are down on Wednesdays. I mean, if every Wednesday they run a route, and you're going to reduce the amount of trash they're picking up if they're hitting up every month, and then the citizens can count on it. For my Wednesdays, first Wednesday of the month, second Wednesday of the month, instead of the big trash skipping around and you never quite know when it's going to be. Or, and not if monthly, every other month, but just consistent, so we always know when it's going to be.
I just have a question regarding that. Big trash, isn't that $25,000? Do I remember that figure correctly?
Well, I think
every-
the one early in the summer, the late summer was a lot higher than what we experienced this last go-round. Again, I think Ken would know that.
I can tell you the tipping fees alone on the spring big trash were over $50,000. So I don't know how much extra we picked up, how much revenue we had against that, but that's $50,000 you're providing for all the tenants. And I think big trash pickup sounds easy to do, but there's a lot of scheduling and logistics in order to get our guys off the regular routes, go pick up the big trash, and then get back to their regular duty. So that's one reason why the big trash we've scheduled for next is condensed to 2 weeks instead of 4 weeks. We started off trying it with 4 weeks to make sure that we could get everything picked up. We didn't have trash on the streets for a month and all that. The next one's going to be the first 2 weeks in December. And I've let Phil and Ronnie and those guys work out the timing on that, because it is significant to schedule that when they have a lot of other things to do. And, you know, basically we've been providing that service for no additional cost. And I think it's catching up to us. I think you can look at the equipment, look at the facilities up there. Going with 11 years without a raise, we've just been cannibalizing the operation up there. And this seems like a big increase, but if, like Hank said, if we'd been raising this a little bit all along, this is where we would be. So anyway, I think that...
Well, one of the other things that I failed to mention that will address Councilor Herron's issue is that they can call on demand service now, which they'll pay $25 as a minimum charge and then the per yard cost. So they could do that at any time, which is the same as what we would do with big trash. So that service level is available.
If I could, along the lines of big trash, that we're giving the service and not being compensated, man hours possibly, but expenditures. So actual 2015, our expenditures was 1.277 million, and year in so that was 2015. We still just did one massive big trash a year. 2019, fiscal year 2019, what we just finished up, our expenditures was 1.255 million, which was actually a decrease from having 4 big trash pickups back to when we just had 1 big trash. So I think it all still averages out. We're not getting rid of any more trash.
Well,
I mean, it may look large because we have that large tipping fee, but it's still being averaged. Looking at these budgets, it still looks like, in fact, we're actually down just a little bit.
The tipping fee is the measurement by which we measure the yardage in tons, because they measure by tons, and then we extrapolate at 6.84 yards per ton. That number has been consistent, but it's been incrementally going up. Nationwide, an average person generates more trash annually as an individual person overall. We've got to stay ahead of the cost, but we also need to look at some alternatives and some cost-saving issues.
Well, I was going to say kudos to our public works then, because if the tipping fees is increasing, they're actually saving on manpower and other areas, because our expenses, if the expenses are accurate and in the right category.
Like we
and
bought
that
those
could be a
sanitation
huge-
trucks and the poly carts, they weren't built into the
Correct.
sanitation cost. So that's an expense that the department had, but we didn't book it into that. We booked it out of CIP. So if you're extrapolating 19, you need to add the 1.2 million.
Which is going back to where it's important to get cost in our budgets associated with the right budgets, because this is all I have to look at. And it looks like sanitation is doing good. They're improving their expenditures to compensate for what the landfill's gone up.
And I think that's what the mayor has been driving, and what we've worked with Berkeley is to try to break out the numbers, just like the police department budget. It takes into account impound fees and CIP funds. It doesn't really represent just the true department costs. So the idea is that we need to get a handle on the cost as it costs the departments, but also because this is a revenue-generating department, we need to make sure we know what the numbers are and the costs are, so the surplus is adequate to go into the general fund.
If I could say so, I think the fact that the expenses in the public works has stayed the same is another testament that we've spent no money up there. We haven't bought any new equipment, no new trucks.
No facility.
you know, we're basically paying our, I know that everyone's got raises, but I think it just is another a fact that we just haven't spent any money up there, and I think we need to spend some money in order to improve the facilities and equipment.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'm just curious, and to Mr. Moore here, if it be possible, main consideration as I look at this is fixed income residents, and those who have talked to me, obviously that's a concern whether it's now or whether it's 6 months down the road. However, if there is some time, that gives them a bit of time to adjust budgets and things and find a way to meet that. So would it be possible to consider maybe splitting this increase in half over the first 6 months and then over another 6 months so that residents have time to adjust budgets and things to prepare for the increase?
That's a council decision. One is that the recommendation from the Leaf Committee was that at the beginning of the fiscal year that we put a 2% increment. So I would hate to have a second increase, then turn around and add a 2%. I do agree that, you know, we could take the 60 days and begin educating and maybe have some neighborhood meetings and discussions and show, because the Leaf Committee did an outstanding job as far as really, because none of them were happy about paying for leaf disposal. But when they got in an understanding and they saw the facilities and saw the equipment and the explanations that Ronnie shared and what I shared, is that they came to appreciate how much we do with what we have and that we've been cannibalizing. And I don't know how much of the council, you know, the facilities up there for sanitation, we had to tear down part of a building just because of the mold and just because it was inhabitable. And we don't have any plans in the budget to replace anything, including an area to shower up there. They all use one shower area in the main building, but it's not ADA compliant either.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I agree that it's probably time for a utility increase. I don't like the idea of someone taking my money and then telling me why they did it. If we're going to educate them, let's educate them first before we take their money or increase the fees that we're charging now. That's a pretty easy concept, getting it out there, and we have to put a special newsletter out, have a public hearing or a meeting, whatever we need to do that. But I'm not sure it's appropriate to raise the rates and then educate you why we did this.
Again, I want to thank the Leaf Committee for having the time, the effort, and the passion to help address this issue and deliver a recommendation that's probably not the most popular one.
Then can we have a motion to pass this at a certain amount of time so that we have time to educate? Or are you wanting to table this, educate, let the task force present to the constituents, because they are citizens that came up with this?
As it stands, that's the 60 to 90 days, do I understand that correctly? As this reads, 60 to 90 days to implement? Is that the time, that's when we would raise the rates? Is that accurate? To go into place then?
Are we voting to raise the rates tonight?
I would hope we would not.
There's not a motion,
That's what I'm asking. That's what this is asking for.
Mayor, did you have another town hall meeting planned on budgets?
Yes, we do.
I think that would probably be an extremely appropriate subject to discuss during there, to get out, first of all, what are our shortages? What are our goals? How much revenues do we need to try to earn? How much revenues are these going to earn over a 5, 10, 20-year period? What are our expenses? What are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? So that way they see the big numbers, not that we're just picking numbers out of the sky. Let's just raise it up $3.40 and earmark here, but this is our cost for equipment replacement over a 20-year period. These are our target numbers, so we have very specific reasons why we're trying to get to that. And I think a budget town hall meeting would probably be a very good use of that.
We could do that. We could add that into that town hall meeting.
Is that, you put that in the form of a motion?
Do I have a motion? Yeah, do I have a motion to table this until the town hall meeting, after the town hall meeting? Do we need to table it to date specific?
That's always best. Maybe
I
the
don't have
first
my phone
meeting
on me,
of,
so I can't look at my calendar, so.
first meeting of November.
Why don't we get through the town hall meeting first?
So it'd be November 5th. November 5th? Table until November 5th? Do I have a
What do you think,
motion
Mr. Paul?
to table resolution number 1572 until
Too short? First
Why is it-
meeting of December?
Why is it too short?
Because we're gonna raise everybody's rates by 50%. That's why, you know, if we want to have a town hall meeting, I think it should be a public forum to allow everybody to come to a complete understanding of why we're doing it,
Yes.
how we're gonna pay for it, what we need, and
Why don't you pick us a date?
I don't want.
I'd like to make sure that the citizen committee is present at that town hall meeting to be able to present what they've proposed to us here.
Be my recommendation to have a town hall meeting and then confer with the leave committee to set a date certain after the town hall. And then they can pick the date according to what they want to do, considering their input and activity and recommendations.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's very important to thank the Leaf Committee that they did a great job, but they're still a very small segment of the community. They did a great job, they came up with great ideas, but they're still only a very small number of people. And we've got to get this out to the rest of the public.
And who all was on the, Crystal, you were on the leaf committee? Yeah. Thank you very much. So do I have a motion to table this until after the town hall meeting?
So moved.
Because you've confused the living mess out of me, because you usually table with a date specific. There is no date specific. It's kind of random, kicking the can down the road motion.
Mr. Mayor, it's crystal clear.
When is the town hall meeting? It's not clear to me.
It, off the top of my head, I can't remember that. I believe that, I'm guessing, I'm trying to remember, I think it's October 17th.
October 17th is what I've done.
Do what?
4th and 5th.
Well, that's what I said previously, but then they said it was too soon.
We can always table again if we need more time.
Once you table it, it's over. You only get one shot to bring it back.
Take it out 2 more weeks,
Really?
we'll compromise. Take it out to the 19th.
Mr. Shari taught me that.
So 19th would be the second council meeting on that?
That'll be 30 days, a little over 30 days.
Do I have a motion to table this item until November 19th, 2019? I want to be specific.
Mr.
We
Mayor,
don't
that's,
push this further down the road.
that's crystal clear, and I make the motion.
Do I have a second?
It's
Second.
somewhat clear, and I'll, yeah.
Please
I'll
cast your
second it.
votes.
Some clarity.
All approved.
So then that allows us to skip item 7, does it not? So that will be, do I need a motion to table that until November, whatever it was, 19th? Do I have a motion to table item 7 until November 19th,
So moved.
2019?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 8 is consideration and possible approval of new water rights lease with Oklahoma City Airport Trust for 1,200 acres of water rights on the Oklahoma City Wiley Post Airport property. Do I have a motion for approval, or do I have a report or a couple comments?
Mr. Mayor, this is something that David Davis sent over. This was a lease from the airport trust that was renewed, the first one in several years, according to David, and his advisement was to sign the lease.
I'd make the motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 9 is consideration and possible approval to accept project CIP 1501 sanitary sewer extension Northwest 46 to Northwest 48 between College and Central as a public improvement, authorized final payment in the amount of $172,072.65 and place the maintenance bond into effect. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 10 is consideration of possible approval of request for lump sum withdrawal from retirement account by retiree Marla Nix. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 11 is consideration of possible approval of employment contract with City Attorney Claudia Connor. Do I have a motion for approval?
Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Was that a
I'm
motion?
sorry.
No, that was not a motion. I just have a comment that I'd like to
I'm
make.
sorry.
That's all right.
I've looked through the contract. There was one issue that I didn't feel very comfortable with, but I think with the recommendation of the committee, there's nothing we can do. I think that's something that we'll have to work out at the 6-month evaluation point, and we'll figure out what to do. But I just wanted to put that on the record, and we will move on.
2 of the 3 council members liked the contract and agreed that it was acceptable and to present the council for having this on the agenda. So do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
To approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
And thank you for being here as our city attorney. Item 12 is an update, discussion, and possible action concerning the water contamination water well efforts. I've asked Ken to have staff make sure that this is on all of our city council agendas as an item, just so we can, as a council, stay up to date with everything that's going on, as well as let our citizens know this is an ongoing process. And so there may be times where we have an update. There may be times where we're taking some kind of action to give somebody some kind of marching orders to look into something or do something. But I think the citizens deserve having this item on our agenda so that we are keeping everybody aware of our water situation. Do we have any kind of update or news?
Yeah, I can tell you that we have taken water samples from 2 private wells on the Stinchcomb property and I think Fisher to the south. We've sent those in for testing. We should have results back within a week or 2, and we'll know whether the contaminants have moved, the plume has moved that far. If not, that will give us an excellent opportunity to drill a couple of test wells there, and if those test wells come out, then that will give us an opportunity to drill some water wells. And if we can get that done in a reasonable amount of time, I'm hoping we can have those wells online before next summer. With the rains and cooler weather, our water problem, we don't have a problem right now. The plant is able to make plenty of water. We're actually below our production. We've had to idle a couple of wells recently, so I think we're good for the rest of the year, and we're trying our hardest to make sure that we can have ample water supplies for next year.
Mr. Mayor, I would propose that we be reactive on this problem and start thinking about potentially not knowing what's going to happen next summer. Think about a full-time rationing program, odd even day or something that the citizens aren't surprised at the last minute. They expect it, they can plan for it, and we can keep ourselves out of trouble. Hopefully we'll get those wells and it'll be a moot point. But
is that something that council needs to vote on? Because we did discuss moving like other cities, that it's an odd even watering that is the standard?
That,
Or is that a city manager?
Well,
decision?
according to ordinance, the city manager can make that decision. That's what we've done. We've left it at a level 1 odd even watering for the duration, so we're not faced with doing anything different when we get into next year. Now, we may have to make more restrictive measures then, but we've left the odd even watering in place.
Any other questions, comments? Item 13 is citizens' opportunity to address the council on general topics related to city business or services. You have a 3-minute limit. No action may be taken under this item. Do we have anybody wishing to address the council?
Crystal Davis, Ward 4. First off, I want to say thanks to Councilmember Knapp for appointing me to the Leaf Committee. It's been a great honor to serve, and I've really learned a lot. And I also want to thank Ronnie Bacon for all of the hard work he has put into conducting those meetings. You know, at times they've been a little hectic, but he's done a really great job with that. The thing I want to bring before council tonight that's concerning to me is when we had that major storm back in August, we had a light pole fall at the intersection of 20th and Flamingo. And I've contacted OG&E, and I've talked to Jeff Knapp and SR Hunter about this as well. Actually, Councilmember Hunter came out the very next day to assure that there was not a safety concern to the public, making sure that the light pole was not active and live, which I really want to thank him for dropping what he was doing and coming out immediately to see to that need. I just want to say I've tried contacting OG&E about it. Nothing has been done regarding this light pole. It is a very dark intersection, and we have a lot of individuals in our neighborhood who walk at night, and with it being kind of a blind corner because there is an overgrown tree at that intersection as well. I'm hoping the city can try to put more pressure on OG&E to get out and get some lighting on that corner.
What, Flamingo and what?
Flamingo and 20th.
I'll make a quick comment. I did
20.
speak with an OG&E rep.
Okay.
I think it was on Thursday, whatever day, last week after you contacted me. So it's still there, obviously.
Yes, and the light pole is just laying on somebody's yard out there as well.
That's Flamingo and what did you say?
20th.
20th.
Mm-hmm. So the light pole's just laying out there. You know, neighbors got out the morning after the storm, and they did clean up the glass that was on the street. So, you know, they deserve a thank you as well for taking care of that issue. So I just want to see if the city can put a little pressure on them to get that fixed.
I'll text our OG&E representative. Thank you. Anybody else?
Marvel Whitehurst, 6600 Northwest 29th Street. First thing is the lights in Eldon Lawton Park. The photo eyes need to be checked on. Those lights broke out that need to be fixed, and the park needs to be sprayed for sandburrs. You can't go home without checking your shoes first. And if you can spend money on the building, let's take care of the sewer system down by Pinal.
Thank you. Anybody else? Item 14 is the city attorney's report.
I don't have a comment except to say thank you for having faith in me. I appreciate it. I'll do a good job for you.
Thank you. Item 15 is city manager's report.
I'll just talk a little bit about Big Trash. Originally, we had scheduled Big Trash over Halloween week, and after consideration of some safety considerations, we've moved that to the first 2 weeks in December. I realize that falls right after the Thanksgiving holiday, but that was about the only 2 weeks that we could schedule that because our crews are busy putting up Christmas lights and a lot of other things, and so that was the date we came up with. We've consolidated to 2 weeks this time instead of 4, but we would ask citizens, please do not put out your trash until it's your designated time so we don't have it on the street. But anyway, that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 16 is the mayor's and council members' announcements, comments, and proposals. And let's start this evening down at Mrs. Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yesterday, Mr. Goodwin and I had the opportunity to attend an event at the Original Food Bank, in which the governor and the mayor of Oklahoma City and a lot of the state representatives and senators were there. And it was really fun. We were dancing to the music, and we were packing those 600 boxes, and to see all of our elected officials in their shirt sleeves and filling those boxes. I just want to encourage that if you have never done that, they do that every day. I think except Sunday. There are some Sundays they do during the holidays. But they need volunteers desperately. I also would like to maybe have council or us as a group consider doing that. Maybe challenge staff or challenge War Acres even, and see if we could do something like that. It would be fun for all of us, I think, and it certainly would be something good for somebody else. They give tours at the location there. I hadn't been there in a number of years, regrettably, and I was amazed at how it not only had increased in the facilities, but in the people that they were reaching out. So I just wanted to say it was a wonderful opportunity. It was nice to be able to work with Matthew and the other people that were there. So that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Connor, it's all official now, so again, welcome aboard. We look forward to a long and fruitful relationship, I'll say. Thanks for everybody in the audience again to show up tonight. It was a long meeting tonight. I think we made great strides tonight. I hope that the selection we made for city manager, I hope this gentleman accepts our offer and we can move forward and start changing the face of Bethany. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Mr. Herron? Mr. Knapp?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad you brought up the Regional Food Bank. I was not able to go for that event this year. I've been down there probably with scouts at least a half dozen times and a couple of other groups, and it is fun. They crank up the music. We're in there boxing
YMCA.
things and we took 2 pallets of frozen peas and bagged them and heat sealed them one time.
Yeah, my hand's
So that
still
was-
hurting from
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But it was fun, and I do encourage anybody to go down there. Get a tour, get a strawberry. They're as big as a baseball. Anyway, I want to thank the Leaf Committee one more time at least, just for their work. Also, he's gone, but Mr. Mendoza, I know that's not the first time he's been in the building. Appreciate him coming today and making that honor from the governor's office. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Palmer?
I'd like to welcome Claudia. Thank you for being here. Thank you for talking to me related to the issues I had with your contract. I'm glad we got that approved and we're off to the races. And so I'm looking forward to a great relationship with our own in-house attorney. I think that's going to be a great opportunity for the city to the extent that we've got a lot of issues, and she's just down the hall and she'll be able to provide that service to us when we need it. I'd also like to thank the Leaf Committee. I think that's a very hot topic, and I think we've got a good game plan as to how we're going to address that to educate the community. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to come up with. And with that, I have nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
Thank you. Echo the thanks to the Leaf Committee, and it's already been said a number of times. Did have a citizen approach me on the scooters project. I didn't mention it earlier just because I feel like it's too late in the game at this point, but I want to bring out for future consideration. They had said about how we are so big on Route 66 and wanting to highlight that and do that, but that we have no standard for businesses that are coming onto Route 66. And places like Austin, Texas, down on 6th Street and various places, there's even national chains that come in. They have to fit a certain design element to fit that aesthetic. And I would love for us as a council and within both community to consider what that might look like. I was in Williams, Arizona this summer, and you drive in there and it looks like Route 66 everywhere you go. I know there's a lot to consider there, but just would like to mention that for future consideration for businesses that come in, that we may consider some type of aesthetic as we think of a master plan and a comprehensive plan going down the road. Second thing, just wanted to give an update on the Freedom Fest planning. I want to give kudos to Hank Moore, our Economic Development Director and Associate City Manager. Let me know that we have the first matching donor towards the Freedom Fest celebration. The Oklahoma Educators Credit Union had already stepped up. They're doing the big revitalization of the building there on 23rd, and they're also going to be a major component of sponsoring the Freedom Fest this next summer. And so economic development is going to continue working on other funds to supplement that, which would be less out of city funds to have to fund that. So I very much appreciate their work on that, and just want to give kudos there for that work. We've also had an initial meeting with a group of citizens from community organizations within Bethany to begin talking about the rest of that day and what that celebration might look like, how we really tell and celebrate the story of Bethany within our freedoms as a country. So there'll be more on that. The city staff, community development did a great job with a survey that went out across the city. There'll be more opportunities like that for input and more opportunities for volunteers to sign up and really hopefully have raised the tide of community involvement with that. And then last thing, just a reminder, the Bethany Breakfast is this Thursday at 7:30 a.m. It's at the Cube, which is directly adjacent to Council Road Baptist Church. It's really a special month. As a former minister, this month is highlighting the faith community. There'll be pastors and clergy from various denominations that'll be there and highlighting that. It'll be a great time this Thursday at 7:30 a.m. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mrs. Sandoval?
Thank you, Mayor. So, good evening. I want to go ahead and start by saying Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. I have much pride being able to wear some of my cultural wear very proudly in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm really happy and glad that we were able to get done too much tonight, and I want to keep promoting the importance of staying civically engaged, and appreciate you all doing so. Hola y buenas noches. Quiero empezar con diciendo feliz mes de la herencia hispana. Qué orgullo poder traer un puesto con un arreglo cultural. Estoy satisfecha con todo lo que hemos hecho como un concejal, y yo quiero seguir promoviendo la importancia de estar involucrados cívicamente con aprecio a la presencia de todos ustedes. Thank you and gracias.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Oklahoma Educators Credit Union for being a part of the City of Bethany and stakeholder on 23rd Street there, and really stepping in and jumping in and being a part of some of the things we're doing, like the Freedom Festival. I'd also like to thank my friend Fred Mendoza for coming tonight and giving us that proclamation. I think that's fantastic. Also would like to thank again the council and the staff for, just the patience and the time that they put in getting us to the point of being able to hire our new city attorney and city manager. I'm really excited about being able to move forward, and I truly believe this is going to be a fantastic team that's going to get a lot accomplished for our city and our citizens, and the best is yet to come. If when you leave here tonight, you may see on the walls out in the lobby, I personally believe our lobby of our city hall is very drab and almost depressing when you walk in here. I know it's depressing for people that walk in here to pay their utility bills at times, but you'll see these black strips that are magnets, and what those are for, staff has put those up. My wife had the idea that I just kind of made a few phone calls with, and I thought it was a great idea to add some color and give people an opportunity to show off their talents regardless of their age in school. And so we will begin working with all the schools in Bethany and rotating student art that will be hanging there. So hopefully that brightens up our lobby with a little more joy as people are coming in to pay their utility bill or come to a council meeting and yell at council members during the citizens address or something. I don't know. I think it's going to be fantastic, and so I'm excited about that. Also, just pray for my wife. She usually is here throughout the remainder of this. She had to go home early because she's feeling a bit sore. She was in a hit and run today, coming home from work, stopped at a stop sign, and it was not a teenager, it was a grown adult, and thankfully the police found them, and hopefully things will be not much damage that we know of to her vehicle, but kind of crazy. And so tell your loved ones you love them, because you never know when something crazy is going to happen. So just pray for her and pray that all is well, and that kind of stuff doesn't happen very often. Are there any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until October 15th, 2019. I call to order the Bethany Public Works Authority. Item 1 is the consent docket A and B. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 2 is consideration and possible adoption of Resolution 1570, a resolution relating to the financing of capital improvements to the water system of the Bethany Public Works Authority and establishing compliance with reimbursement bond regulations under the Internal Revenue Code. Do I have any comment?
Yes, if I could just set this up a little bit. Chris Byram, who's in the audience tonight, approached us about a month ago, and he suggested that we pass a resolution that would allow us to include the monies that we're spending now to be included in future financing for water wells. Chris has drawn up the resolution for us, and I'll hit him come forward now, and you can talk a little bit about that, Chris, and be available to answer questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ken. Chairman and trustees, my name is Chris Byram. I'm with Johanning and Byram. We've represented the PWA in all their current and past financings. The resolution you have before you is in contemplation of doing your water expansion project, namely the water wells and any lines that would be needed to do that. I know you've had a long meeting. I could bore you even further with IRS regulations, but the bottom line is what this resolution allows you to do under the IRS code is, if you so choose, and when you determine to do a financing for your water project, it will allow you to finance those costs that you're going to spend out of pocket prior to incurring the debt. In other words, money you spend right now for such expenses as drilling test wells and anything related thereto. If you so decide at the time you determine to do a financing, this would allow you, under the IRS code, to reimburse yourself out of that financing and put that money back into the fund from which it came. Did I make myself clear, or do I need to elaborate?
Sounds like a deal to me.
And again, it gives you that flexibility. You may get to that point and say, we really don't want to do that. You're not under any obligation to do it. By passing it, though, you do give yourself that option. Essentially, that's it in a nutshell.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
I make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
All approved.
Item 3 is consideration and possible approval of new water rights lease with Oklahoma City Airport Trust for 1,200 acres of water rights on Oklahoma City Wiley Post Airport property. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 4 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until October 15th, 2019. I call to order the Bethany Hospital Trust. Item 1 is consent docket A and B. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until October 15th, 2019. I call to order the Bethany Development Authority. Item 1, consent docket A and B. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
All approved.
Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until October 15th, 2019. And with that, we are adjourned.